You're
Hey,
welcome.
Elle,
Hmm?
is this the first time you put such a lovely picture? I can see your whole face with your makeup on. You're so pretty.
Oh, thank you.
I agree.
Yeah, I usually am Wednesday Adams. But
I love
yes,
this
I am.
picture.
Oh,
Yep.
thank you. I mean, did you watch the documentary?
Not yet,
Which
Elle.
one?
I need to watch that.
Okay, I hope you enjoy it. All right, let's let Tyler
I
do his
will.
thing.
Okay.
The
1 minute to the
soldiers,
top of the
sorry,
hour.
Okay. Well,
the
hey,
American soldiers that got killed actually got to 13 now. It's really sad, and 90 Afghans, so it's
And
bad.
also, Netherlands, all of the European countries have stopped all efforts to recover their people. Netherlands announced it too. Germany announced it. All the European Union countries have actually announced, sadly, that they're not gonna retrieve any of the nationals
I
because
saw
they
one
can't they
headline that
can't risk.
that Russia is now trying to get their people out.
Well, Russia will go
Russia?
balls to the
I thought they
wall.
wanted to keep the embassy.
No, well, apparently not. That the headline I read was Russia's now wanting to get their people out now that it's become like really unstable. Because the idea was
But
that the Taliban were going to come in and it was going to stay stable, but this group, this
ISIS K.
ISIS K.
ISIS
Yeah.
K, which is a local version of, they're claiming affiliation with ISIS. They themselves were not part of the Syrian ISIS groups. They were not directly on the ground there, but they subscribe to the same approach and philosophy. And it's, for those who don't know, it gets very complex, and Americans easily confuse all Middle Eastern kind of radical groups of different, it's a spectrum. And Americans confuse everything from the Taliban to ISIS. There's actually a huge spectrum there, which
Yeah,
the
ISIS.
Taliban is primarily a political group who have been known to use rather extreme measures to achieve their political aims. ISIS is not doesn't really have a political aim. It's just terrorism. I mean, it's like combinations of how strong your drink is. Sometimes it's 5% alcohol and 90% water, and sometimes it's a 90% alcohol. ISIS is like 90% alcohol, 5% water. It's like full on. They barely have any coherent political thing. It's just mass kind of death and destruction, and the Taliban hate them for that. That Taliban's like, why can't you guys be like chilled the fuck out and like, and then they don't get along. The ISIS is like, why are you even having conversations with these Western infidels? Just blow everything up. So
Well, ISIS K said everybody was not radical enough. They said Al Qaeda wasn't radical enough. They
exactly,
said the
precisely
Taliban
my
wasn't.
point.
So they came over from, they started, we were a small group in Pakistan.
Yeah.
And they've been known, and they also flourished in Bangladesh, trying to do things, and several other countries. And now they're in Afghanistan, trying to, I guess they see an opportunity because the Taliban is not stable enough to do all the governmental infrastructure and the supporting you need to do. So hopefully it does not end hopefully Afghanistan does not end up getting permanently labeled as a terrorist haven like one other country has. So let's
What's
hope
going to be
it's.
interesting is the Chinese are now panicking. I got from because they were
Okay.
betting a lot of going into Afghanistan. Now all their plans are gone.
Hey, a question. When did the bomb went off?
Right at the
Near
airport
Kabul?
gate
Outside the
Is it
airport
two?
gate.
No,
At the
is it
airport
when?
gate.
When is it? 2 days ago or?
One day ago.
No,
No,
One day.
last
Yesterday.
night.
It was
Okay, you
precisely
know what?
it was
Wait.
precisely 24 hours ago from
Okay,
right
the
now.
reason why I asked this is Russian military evacuates 500 from Afghanistan. That was 2 days ago.
Uh-huh.
So that was before the
yeah,
blast.
Yes, and
No,
by the
before
way,
the
We already
blast,
know
but
all
yes.
this.
it was known that it was going to happen. They warned they were going to do it, and that's
Yep,
why
yeah,
yep.
yeah, yeah.
the
So
U.S. and the U.K. This is really crazy. There were so many Afghanis around the airport wanting to hopefully get on a flight. It was getting very crowded. There was reportedly thousands of people, and trying to get into the airport. They were waiting outside. Huge. Calling it a queue or a line is not sufficient. It's a crowd outside the gate, and there were so many. And then they got report that this bomb was, expected to happen. This kind of attack against, namely, that they specifically targeted the spot where there was the most American military and Afghani locals who were trying to leave. And so that's why shortly before, about 6 hours before, they made them disperse. They said, get out of here. There's a huge bomb threat here. And they forced everyone to evacuate. Not everybody evacuated, particularly the American military. They were staying there protecting the airport. But it could have been way, 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 way worse had they not forced the mass crowds to depart from the airport.
Okay. Anyway, Chris is late for class, so he's kept out of the door now. So can you bring him up?
Tardy. Look at all these tardy folks now with their hands up.
Suzanne, JT's here too.
And JT and Chris, all tardy.
It's a little, it's like 10 o'clock scholars over here.
Class ran late, Ty. Sorry, we were up until like 3:30 last night.
You had to stand outside the door, right?
Yeah, Chris was the cool kids. That's why we all went to bed early.
Okay, it's 5 minutes.
5 minutes late.
Yeah.
Here we go. And then what we have at the top of the hour is the Apple agrees to settle a class action lawsuit and will let developers directly contact customers, inform them about purchase options outside of iOS and more. And then, since that was the big headline when we met 8 hours ago, it's still the big headline. It probably will still be the big headline tomorrow. That's how big of a story that is. It's one of the biggest headlines of the year, honestly, within tech. And now there's been more people tweeting about this, most notably the CEO of Epic Games himself, Tim Sweeney. I got to find his tweet because it's buried in this. There's so many people tweeting about this that it's even hard to find his tweet out of all. It's just an insane amount of people talking about this. And then Casey Newton, he's a journalist. He says, feels like a desperate bid to hang on to that 30% take rate as long as possible. Because not everyone will jump out. Namely, only the really big companies will quickly jump out. Here's Tim Sweeney. He says, here's an article that links to the court's PDF document with the full proposed settlement terms. Developers should read this original source to see exactly what was agreed. It's all here in the PDF, and I will tweet that out now so everyone can see. Can
I add one line, Tyler? Go ahead.
He says the lawsuit Apple settled today was the developer class action suit, not our Epic versus Apple case we are fighting on. So, and then he links separately to, he does a reply to his own tweet, to making it into a little tweet thread, where he says, here's the article that links to the court's PDF with the full proposed settlement terms. Developers should read this original source to see exactly what was agreed. It's all there in the PDF. Okay. So that is big, big news indeed. And for those who, just to unpack it, basically, Epic Games is the maker of Fortnite. Fortnite is the 2 years ago, it just absolutely blew up as like the biggest phenomena in gaming. One of the biggest phenomena in gaming history, honestly. It's kind of in the Hall of Fame of games at this point. And their point was, why are we forced to pay Apple 30% of all of the money when the users would be very happy to download from us directly? They're looking for Fortnite. They're coming into the app looking for Fortnite. Why do we have to be in your app store? They want to download from us directly. They would be happy to do so. And if that were the case, we would get 30% more revenue. So this is ridiculous. Why are we giving you this money? And Spotify says the same thing. In fact, Spotify's example is even stronger, because Spotify is saying these users would love to. These are people who are using Spotify, who are upgrading to the paid version of Spotify. They already have Spotify. They already knew about Spotify. They would have learned about Spotify even without the app stores. And they use the free version for 3 months. They get a 3-month free trial. At the end of the 3 months, they want to upgrade to the pro version for $9 a month. Actually, now $12 a month. It was originally $9 a month. or about $9.99, and then people upgrade, but they have to pay through Apple. And Spotify's like, this is bullshit. Why can't they just pay us directly? And Apple's like, nope, they got to pay us. We get our cut in the App Store. They pay us, and then we keep 30%. We pay 70% to you, the app. That's Spotify. Spotify's like, this is bullshit. Because, and then it's even worse because Apple is directly competing with Spotify for the exact same product, streaming music subscriptions, and Apple's only charging $9.99, but Spotify now has to charge $12.99 to make up for the 30% difference. And so Spotify, Epic, and a bunch of other people are like, this is just a whole bunch of bullshit. And so they put together this big lawsuit. This is a massive, massive lawsuit. And there's actually two different lawsuits, but they're both the same thing. One is a class action lawsuit of all of the other developers who joined together to sue Apple on the same essential premise. And then Epic went at it alone in their Epic versus Apple lawsuit, and that's still ongoing. But basically, the big news today is Apple's now saying, okay, app developers or apps are allowed to take payments from the users directly. So you don't have to pay through Apple. You don't pay Apple and then Apple pays the developer minus 30%. You pay the developer directly. So Spotify can now charge directly and get paid directly. So
that's the point that I wanted to bring up with you, because there was a paper that I read and I tweeted it out, which clearly defines the economics of the settlement, right? And a point that they brought up in the economics was, if any of those developers that are going to get that 30% concession and have that $1 million benchmark, over the past 5 years, if they've made above $1 million, they don't qualify. So the 2 points of the 30% concession and being in touch directly with the clients, do they go together below $1 million or above $1 million, or how does that work? And the way the paper was framing it was both of them to go together along that $1 million benchmark. So if they made, even for 1 year, if they crossed $1 million benchmark, they don't qualify for that.
Okay. Well, it will all become more clear in the days to come. Because it's all in text now, and then when it turns into actual practice, that's when we really find out what's going on. So, the next biggest headline is that Microsoft warns thousands of cloud customers that a now fixed Azure Cosmos vulnerability might have exposed databases, and that's just your hourly update that Microsoft security doesn't exist. It's an open piece of Swiss cheese, and we're going to be here for a few hours, and every hour you will get another update of another separate vulnerability inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. And that's just the one for this hour. And it's the second biggest story at the moment. The next, and honest to God, there's been a headline every day related to a major Microsoft vulnerability for every day for the past 2 weeks. And there's multiple today, separate ones. So if you're going to hang out, get comfortable, sit back, relax, that narrative will come back around. The next,
do you think it's just a culture of ignoring security issues, or what's the issue that Microsoft has that's unique? Is it the legacy they have? Is it something endemic to the way they develop software? Like, what's going on with Microsoft?
I'm not exactly sure.
It's like they started building a house, and then they just kept adding on rooms and rooms and rooms and rooms
That's
and
awesome.
stuff. And
Tyler.
Yeah.
like they forgot to build the hallway that leads to the bathroom, and like that
Tyler.
little stuff like that, they just
It began
forget.
with Microsoft Exchange, I think, Chris. So I don't know what the mechanics of that are, but maybe someone more qualified on the stage can add to that. Microsoft Exchange and
Sorry.
Patch Tuesdays, which is
I
something in Microsoft
Tyler.
terminology.
yeah. So I've been doing Exchange Server since like 2003. It's their one franchise that is really like got them hooked up for business, because it's your your email, your calendar, and then they've branched out into the Microsoft Office 365 franchise. So I mean, that's really what I was getting at, is like, you started off with Microsoft Word and it wasn't on the cloud. You were just, saving things on floppy. Then they have to evolve and get into cloud, but they've always been in web via Exchange Server, like for a long, long time. And these things are just notoriously hard to patch because there's literally 300 to 500 processes running on them all the time, and then and they have 0-day exploits on them that have been in the Windows platform since day one. So, they have a leaky OS, a leaky server system, and then a very leaky ecosystem of apps.
Amay?
Yeah, I was just going to say that to Chris's point and Faraz's point, having done enough of migrations from, oh my God, Windows 95 to Windows 98. Oof. Anyways, the moral of the story that I agree with Chris and agree with Faraz, but also I wanted to put another layer into this. When you start seeing where much of the center of excellences are going and they're ending up in areas where the customer service is not necessarily at the level where it would be, like the tech support. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to look at also where all these companies, specifically Microsoft, which was one of the first major tech companies to offload some of their services into like India, and make it like a center of excellence, right? And this also too has a huge piece of it as well because of what Chris is saying. If you've got all of these moving parts and these integrations, it's going to be very difficult to keep up with that if you've outsourced pieces of your work to other locations. And I say this very eloquently because even when I had a conversation with the CEO of Tata when I graduated with my MBA, we had this conversation about it as well during a cultural conversation. He even said it himself. He would not send certain things that have to do with business intelligence and process-driven things that require a lot of detail. He would not send that type of work or accept that type of work in some of the projects he takes for Tata because he also understands the bandwidth of what his consultants could do. Same thing with MindWorks, which is another Indian consultancy that works out of London as well. They normally say that they send BI stuff and anything that requires a lot of bandwidth of process-driven stuff to understand the integration points, and it's going to take a lot of heavy hitting, like Chris described. We would send that work to Macedonia, to Montenegro, to parts of the Eastern Europe, Balkan region where they had a Western way of working, where they also had a huge pride in their work being correct. So there's a cultural and behavioral dynamic that were also looked at when we were going through those iterations of where do we put certain support and certain elements of the business. So I think it's a convoluted piece. I think it dives deeper. It's not just as simple as saying that there's a lot of integration points. I think there's a human resource component as well. And we find this a lot with SAP when we send data or information to be developed in other parts of the world. We see it with the way we get the data, that we get the development back when the objects are dropped. They're not always done with the same care and concern. When we send it to different parts of the world, we do see that certain parts of the world are stronger, other parts of the world are less stronger. And that's something that we have to look at when we do development and architecture for a system, specifically SAP related. Okay. And I think it's the same thing with Microsoft.
Okay. So the next big story is the Wall Street Journal says they have sources that China plans to propose rules that would ban companies with large amounts of sensitive customer data from going public in the US. There you go. You just said it out loud. There it is. That's all you had to do. And as they are known to do, they don't really pull any punches. And I got to say, I love this about China. So China plans to propose rules that would ban any companies with large amounts of sensitive customer data from going public in the US. That's what we assumed all along. They're very hypersensitive about Chinese data, and they don't want anyone having any chance of having any access to it. No way, no how. Bill Gurley tweeted about this. Bill happens to be one of the best investors and minds in all of tech, and it is was on the board of Uber, and he's just a legend in the game. And so he tweets about this article, important read, hard not to view the consumer data issue as a red herring, simply because U.S. investors don't actually get much data, especially due to accounting rules. Either way, the SEC was trying to end it. Now China is. So it's mutual. China, I mean, the U.S. doesn't want the companies either. China doesn't want them to go there either. It's totally mutual. I mean, I guess the losers in this are the Chinese apps themselves. The state doesn't want them to IPO in America. America doesn't really want them to IPO in America. So I think the loser is Chinese entrepreneurs, honestly. So there you go. The next one is, and then the question is, are they? Is that really what it's about? Yeah, I actually kind of, I don't know that it is a red herring. I tend to actually believe them. Let's go ahead.
Tyler, quick question
Yes.
on the the company, the Chinese company, which is the equivalent to Uber, and we were talking about how the
Didi.
Yeah, and we had a hypothesis that they didn't want the recordings of conversations between high-level officials. I thought that was a really excellent line of thought and very credible.
Yeah, that came from on the ground geek, a Chinese entrepreneur realized that people didn't understand why Didi got shut down the way that it did. It was clearly about data. I mean, even China made that very clear that they were upset. It was very clear based on their actions and even their words. They were saying, this is about data. They went to the company, they forced their way in, they went right to the servers. It was clearly they were very concerned about the data. And no one could really figure out why. Is it about the users and how they're moving around? No, it turns out that one of the Didi drivers is kind of like the Uber of China, had sexually assaulted a female passenger, and as a kind of remedy to prevent that from happening in the future, they had a policy of installing cameras with microphones in the cars near the rearview mirrors, so both by the way, passengers do abhorrent shit to drivers all the time as well. So this is just a way to stop bad behavior on both parties. So, however, that wasn't really known or understood by the government. Didi did that without really. They didn't really need to alert the government they were doing that. There's no rule against that. So, but the government had been already, Didi is wildly popular in China, including by government party officials who use it on a multiple times a day. So, and they're often on their phones having conversations, and there's no doubt, given the volume of Didi rides by government officials, there is absolutely statistically, certitude that they inevitably said things that they would really, that are potentially of national security issues. And they couldn't risk those recordings getting out. So they basically panicked and kind of shut the whole thing down. And again, that was, no journalist has still to this day ever reported that. That is purely from a geek on the ground who's like, here's what's really going on here, for those who don't know. And he felt the need to come out and say that because he noticed that nobody could understand what was really going on, what the real motives were.
Yeah, you've just reminded me that it was also the Dukes of Hazzard. It was a bit of fun that we had as well together. The Didi.
Oh yeah,
variety here.
Yeah, Didi. Oh, that was wild. Yeah, the government told them no, don't go IPO in America, and they're like, should we or shouldn't we? And they just hit the pedal to the metal and just ran, straight up sprinted, without looking behind them, knowing it's that moment when the police officer is like, stop. And you're like, oh shit, should I stop or should I run for my life? And their big investors had already been through this once before. Their big investors are SoftBank and Jack Ma from Alibaba. And both of those individuals had been in that same scenario before, where the government said, stop. And they stopped. And then they got beat to shit, bloodied on the ground. They just got really knocked the fuck out. And so this time when the government said stop, this time it was Jack Ma and Masa were the investors in Didi. And no doubt Didi asked Jack and Masa, hey, what should we do? And we have to assume they said, run, baby, run. Go run to the stock market so we can sell these shares in your company before they beat the shit out of us and take all of our money.
We need General Lee, Tyler.
I know. I'm looking for the horn. Here it is. So they took the car and jumped over the drawbridge, and then the, if those who grew up with the Dukes of Hazzard knows exactly what that sound means. That's the sound of the car jumping over the river as the police are in hot pursuit. So, Yeah, it is what it is. But now China's coming out plain as day, stopping IPOs for anyone who has important data. China plans to propose new rules that would ban companies with large amounts of sensitive customer data from going public in the U.S. People familiar with the matter said a move that is likely to thwart the ambitions of the country's tech firms to list abroad. Yeah, no shit. A move that is likely to thwart the ambitions of the... Yeah, no. What do you mean it's going to thwart the ambitions? They're making it fucking illegal. Of course it's going to... It would likely thwart the ambitions? No, absolutely for fucking certain it's going to thwart. We just made it illegal to do X. That's likely to thwart the ambitions of companies. Gee, you think making it illegal is going to likely thwart the ambitions? Oh my fucking God. This isn't even Bloomberg. I just assumed it was Bloomberg by the stupidity. Yeah, it's the Wall Street Journal in this case. Anyway, in a few weeks, officials from China's stock regulator have told some companies and international investors that the new rules would prohibit internet firms from holding a swath of user-related data from listing abroad, the people said. The regulator said that the rules target companies seeking foreign initial public offerings via units incorporated outside the country, according to the people. China's Securities Regulatory Commission officials said that the companies with less sensitive data, such as those in the pharmaceutical industry, are still likely to receive Chinese regulatory approval for foreign listings, according to people. I like how that according to people, according to people, as opposed to plants and dogs, like according to people. The new rules are likely to help Beijing exert more control over the complex corporate structure that China's biggest tech companies use to sidestep restrictions on foreign investment. Chinese leaders consider sectors such as the internet, telecommunications, and education sensitive because of political security concerns. Oh, wow. Of political or national security concerns. Wow, that's the first time I've read that. Now it's becoming clear now. Well, somebody told them. Somebody is whoever these people are actually know what they're talking about, because that is the reason they're concerned. And that's the first time I've heard it reported so clearly. Chinese technology giants such as Alibaba and Didi and Tencent have used such corporate structures known as variable interest entities to attract foreign capital and list offshore. The Chinese regulatory agency didn't immediately respond to a request for comment under the new rules. China would also establish a mechanism that requires companies to obtain formal approval for overseas IPOs from a cross-ministry committee that would be set up in the coming months, they said. So now you got to ask mom and dad if you can take the car out for the weekend, even though you're 16, even though you got your big pants on.
Were you planning a kegger DD while I was out?
You're going to that party. I know where you're going to go get wasted down by the river, and let's have a quick little interview. Let's make sure you don't crash the car, and start talking to those crazy Americans that are going to be at that party, and start telling them all those secrets that you have, all that juicy data. We don't want people getting access to that sweet, sweet, juicy national security data. So the next biggest headline at the moment is that YouTube is implementing picture-in-picture functionality in its iOS app starting October 31st. Big whoopee. The next is that Netflix is testing games in its Android app in Poland, starting with 2 existing Stranger Things games. Stranger Things is a very popular series on Netflix, and this is a wild idea that Netflix shows or series or even movies could become video games. And this is very smart on Netflix's part, because the lines between what today is a movie and what is a video game are very, very far apart. But they are quickly running towards each other. As anyone who plays modern video games knows, the characters inside of the video games and the narratives inside of the video games and the drama inside of the video games is starting to become incredibly cinematic and very movie-like. You feel like you're a character in a fucking movie now when you play these modern video games. Even the war games, it's like you have this objective and you got to go, this agent, you feel like James Bond inside of a James Bond film, but you're James Bond in this experience, and you got to fight some bad guys on the way and whatever. But you have missions, and then at the end of each mission you get an update from FBI HQ telling you watch out for this bad actor, and then that bad actor appears and they walk up to you and they start talking to you. But in the very near future, those bad actors are going to get far more intelligent due to AIs, and even it could even be Tom Cruise as an actor in the video game, given that what a deep fake is. They get his face, his voice, and due to GPT-3, which will soon be GPT-4, you can talk to Tom Cruise in this video game and be like, so Tom, where's the dynamite hidden? And he might, respond accordingly in a really interesting way. And now you can see how this video game is becoming more and more movie-like very quickly. So it's smart of them to get ahead of the curve on this and start with this now, with the video games related to titles, because movies of the future will become themselves more video game like. They're going to become 3D. They're going to become VR. You watch movies today on a flat screen, that's likely to change. That's likely to become you're wearing a VR headset, and what used to be a theater, movies are essentially an alternative to theater, and theater has been around for centuries, in fact millennia. Film has only been around less than a century, and theater has been around for centuries. So film is still relatively a new thing. This idea of we still sit in a theater. It's still called a theater, but instead of having live actors on stage, it's a fucking screen. It's actually a really cheap, low budget, version of a play. And according, just based on, if you take media theory and media history. So, which I did, that's why I'm ranting about this. But the point is that that screen and that theater, there's a very clear line between the audience and the actors on stage, even in film. Although that's starting to blur, because they intentionally try and make the main actors in films to feel like you, the character in the audience, and you on the audience, unknowingly, subconsciously project your own ego and image onto the main character, be it Harry Potter or Black Panther or whatever, or Luke Skywalker or Princess Leia. And that's why there's so much attention put on the genders and racial demographics of the actors in movies, because people want to project themselves onto those characters. And that's why when Wonder Woman comes out, young women and parents of young women get very excited because we do that. We project our own egos onto those characters. So the point is, in the very near future, we won't need to project ourselves onto the characters. We will be the fucking characters in these movies in VR. That's sort of the point. And you can design your avatar however, whatever gender and race and height and whatever, you want it to appear as an avatar. So the point again is, this world between film and game is very quickly merging, and that's why I feel it's very smart for Netflix to start getting into games now and encouraging all those film producers to start building game titles that they will have potentially exclusively in Netflix. I bet even the contracts that Netflix is signing today with the TV shows and films on Netflix include the rights to be the exclusive distributor of their games, whether or not they have them today. So if they buy Evan's upcoming movie or TV series, the contract will say, yes, we're doing a contract for your film or TV show. However, we also will include, if you produce a video game along the same title, we will also be the exclusive distributor of that video game.
It's already on OnlyFans.
Okay. Well, that's smart.
Rights.
Yeah, there you go. So next big story is from Protocol. China says and by the way, these when I go through these headlines, I am not choosing the order of these headlines. I'm reading from an actual data-driven top 20 list every time. And
where do you get that list, Tyler?
I'm intentionally not revealing that. But
come on,
it's all right. But the interesting thing is, story number 1, 2, 3 today was the one about China plans to propose rules that would ban companies with large amounts of data from going public. Story number 3, 4, 5, 6 is China calls the 996 work culture a serious violation of labor law. Now watch how fast this story evolved in the past 12 hours. First, China comes out meaning the government, and says that the 996 work culture, which means working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, which is the sort of standard in big cities in China, that this a 996 work culture, a weekly schedule of 6 12-hour working days, popular among Chinese tech firms, is a quote-unquote serious violation of labor law. The government says that 12 hours ago. And then 6 hours ago, a Chinese court rules it's illegal. Wow, that was fast. Holy shit, that's China speed. So the government says it's a serious violation, and then the court says, "Yep, we hereby rule it's actually now a legal law. It's a violation, and now you can be punished if you." So now employees now have a path to holding their employers accountable because it's now technically illegal. The question is, what is the punishment? I would love to know the answer to that, but the reason I mention this is because that's article number 6. Article number 8 is also about China. Number 7 is that Dell has a great quarterly earnings report. Who cares? But article number 9 is from Bloomberg that China plans to implement rules to control the recommendation algorithms tech companies use for bidding practices that encourage addiction or high consumption. And we knew this was coming. This is a variation on another article that we saw a week ago, that the Chinese government wants control of the algorithms of the social media companies in China. Why? Because they're worried that it's poisoning the minds of Chinese citizens, that it's actually causing them to become stupid and not go to work and stay at home and play video games and get, unhealthy and become, what was the words that they used? Isolated, causes social isolation. And they want people out and about, hanging out in the park, meeting people and having a more healthy lifestyle, and procreating is the other big reason, by the way. But I thought it was very interesting that this is the first time I've seen in the top 10 3 articles on China in the top 10, because we cover them all the time here, but now apparently other people are as well. So this headline, and this is, I want to read this one myself. It's from Bloomberg. It says, China plans control of tech algorithms that U.S. can only dream of. Cybersecurity Administration make 30-point proposals for changes. Companies affected could include TikTok, Apple, and Alibaba. Chinese regulators are seeking to implement far-reaching rules about the algorithms technology companies use to recommend videos and other content, claiming authority over internet services that governments like the U.S. have struggled to regulate. So this is a really wild concept. Like, hey, imagine the government saying, hey, Twitter, we're going to take control over what people see on Twitter now. Oh, YouTube? Yeah, I'm sure you have an algorithm for what you recommend to people. And we've noticed that you're giving people a whole lot of really terrible content, a lot of crap, because that's what people click on. That, fear and misery, that people get. That's really viral shit. By the way, it's just ironically, I happened to watch the Sacha Baron Cohen. Let me play it for you. I mean, he really spells this out perfectly. He gives a speech about Facebook that really makes this just insanely clear. Here it is. Hold on. I hope this is the bit that covers it. Let's see.
Thank you for this recognition and your work in fighting racism, hate, and bigotry. And to be clear, when I say racism, hate, and bigotry, I'm not referring to the names of Stephen Miller's Labradoodles. Democracy, which depends on shared truths, is in retreat, and autocracy, which depends on shared lies, is on the march. Hate crimes are surging, as are murderous attacks on religious and ethnic minorities. Now, what do all these dangerous trends have in common? I'm just a comedian and an actor, I'm not a scholar, but one thing is pretty clear to me. All this hate and violence is being facilitated by a handful of internet companies that amount to the greatest propaganda machine in history. In every other industry, you can be sued for the harm you cause. Publishers can be sued for libel. People can be sued for defamation. I've been sued many times. I'm being sued right now by someone whose name I won't mention because he might sue me again. But social media companies are largely protected from liability for the content their users post, no matter how indecent.
So they made an edit in his speech. He went on to the part they just edited out was he makes very strongly the point that about the algorithms, that the algorithms are exacerbating all of the hate and fear because that's what keeps people engaged, and that's why they are incentivized to do that. So their business models, inherently kind of based on that. So that's what I wanted to get into, because let me get back to this article. It says the Cyberspace Administration of China unveiled a 30-point draft proposal for algorithm recommendation management regulations that would directly affect companies including TikTok, Tencent, and others. The rules would forbid practices that encourage addiction or high consumption. Wow, imagine that. As well as any activities that endanger national security or disrupt social or economic order. Tech industry algorithms have been at the heart of political controversies around the world. Facebook and Google have been accused of serving up stories and videos that have exacerbated political polarization and fueled violence. In the U.S. congressional hearings in March, the companies were accused of using their platforms to hook kids on services like YouTube and Instagram. While U.S. government has had limited success in enforcing changes, Beijing's regulators have substantial power. The Chinese government has implemented a series of crackdowns this year against monopolistic practices and unfair competition in the tech industry. The CAC is seeking public comment on the draft for 30 days and didn't specify when it planned implementation. It's not clear how the agency will implement the proposals. Here are some of the key proposals. Companies must disclose the basic principles of any algorithm recommendation service, explaining the purpose and mechanisms for recommendations in a conspicuous manner. TikTok's not going to be able to do that, by the way. They must provide users convenient options for turning off algorithm recommendations and immediately implement any request to opt out. Oh shit! That's every social media company in China. You just heard them say "oh shit" in Chinese. Algorithms should not be used for price discrimination based on users' preferences and habits. Providers must regularly assess and test their algorithms and data to avoid models that will induce users' obsessive behaviors. Their entire algorithms are designed to encourage obsessive behaviors, and now they can't. This is they must adhere to mainstream values and actively spread positive energy and promote the application of algorithms for the better. You got to spread positive energy. No more of this Debbie Downer shit. Algorithms cannot be used to set up fake accounts or falsely influence rankings and search results to benefit the provider, influence online discourse, or avoid regulatory oversight. Algorithms cannot endanger national security, disrupt economic or social order, or infringe on the legitimate rights or interests of others. Algorithm providers who can influence public opinion or mobilize the masses need to submit their services for the government approval. Those without approval can be fined up to 30,000 yuan and ordered to terminate service. We own your algorithms, all up and down, left, right, back to front, and any content we don't like, you're fucked. So all of the social media companies in China just went, okay, we're done. Game over. It's like OnlyFans without porn. Like everything we've been doing, TikTok is exactly the antithesis of everything I just read. So what's going to happen now to the Twitter and the TikTok and the Instagram and the Facebooks of China? They're toast. Utter toast.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler, wouldn't it be funny if China pulled the OnlyFans and said, "We're just kidding" later?
But it's hard for an American to even imagine what this means. Imagine your super puritanical grandmother just took over Mark Zuckerberg's role at Facebook and decided, and her and her church lady friends are now controlling the algorithms.
Tyler,
yes,
there's some regulars in the room.
Okay,
Danish, John, and
okay,
Jeremiah.
Thank you. So, but that's just to give you an idea.
Tyler,
yes.
we used to have a Mary Whitehouse in England who did exactly what you just said. But so yeah, she was always. This was in the TV days when, as a teenager, I do remember Mary Whitehouse not allowing any words of foul words coming on TV. So yeah.
So
Do
that's
you think the question is, do you think what's happening in China will filter through to our
Oh,
democracies
now,
or
now
not?
watch. This is I raised this point when we
Yeah.
were here 8 hours ago. So TikTok is the biggest social media app in America now, in terms of downloads in the past year. So TikTok is run by China. So do we imagine they're going to say, "Hey, TikTok, by the way, let's do the same in America. Let's make sure you only have really nice,
No
content.
twerking.
No twerking in anywhere. Or is this only in China? Do you imagine, or do you think they'll ask TikTok to implement similar wholesome standards for the content
But
in America, or do you?
but
Yes.
sorry, Tyler, but there's a bigger issue, right? Like when you started, you said the whole thing about China doing this for the well-being of the public. But interestingly enough, the question, I don't know who asked, will other countries do this? I think one of the conversations that's going on in the corridors of power, or wherever you call it, in NGOs and social organizations, is this whole concept of digital well-being. That there's a lot of cases of depression of young kids because of Facebook, because of the fear of missing out, FOMO, all the messaging. And there's an NGO in India that's getting a lot of funding, which is doing a lot of stuff on digital detox, digital well-being, training kids on how to use technology and social media with more intention. And if it gets worse, I can imagine other countries also following policies and regulations that kind of regulate what goes on into social media, right? Beyond just for protecting the kids. Just wondering, this could be a start of a larger trend.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, and
what I
if
was
you
trying to get at, Tyler. What's your take on this in terms of will liberal democracies allow, because there will be people who in our organizations and communities who will want to do similar sort of thing, and they take that as an
This
angle?
just can't. It's hard to imagine this happening in America. It's hard to even begin to imagine, given the government just has the precedence is the opposite in America. The precedence is governments really do not have any ability to police this. And I mean, it goes into kind of how the government shouldn't have anything to do with journalism either. They can't tell a newspaper what to do and what not to do, and nor can they tell these platforms what to do or what not to do. And it's that's the way America likes it. Unfortunately, these platforms, as Sacha Baron Cohen argues, and as China seems to understand, I think we could owe a lot of the vaccine hesitancy precisely to these platforms, and a lot of hatred and a lot of division and a whole lot of everything. And in fact, the security boss of Facebook himself and the head of the fucking FBI say that China is intentionally boosting content to precisely to cause this division in America. So they know very damn well how this poisons the minds of citizens, and they are intentionally poisoning the minds of Americans to not get vaccinated. In fact, Russia was named by the FBI directly. By the head of the FBI says that there were actual campaigns that came right back to the Kremlin that were trying to scare people away from getting vaccinated, saying that Pfizer was causing deaths.
and Tyler, the Sacha Baron Cohen said, he's just a comedian. He's not an academic. If you want to read a really brilliant analysis of this, Roger McNamee wrote the book Zucked, and he was actually one of the earliest investors in Facebook. He was Mark Zuckerberg, one of Mark Zuckerberg's main mentors. He introduced Mark to Sheryl Sandberg, got the ball rolling with a lot of what's happening, and became very disillusioned in how they use the platform in all these profit promoting ways that have clear and well documented harms on society. And his analysis is really a good read for anybody who's interested in the depths of the mechanisms that allowed this to happen.
Yeah, that is he's become quite and it's hard because he was so fundamental at the start of Facebook. So is Chamath Palihapitiya, who was the head of growth for Facebook from the very beginning. and came in and really was fundamental in the virality of Facebook. And now he honestly regrets it, and he won't let his kids use it. And he says, it's like a cancer of the mind and whatnot. So there's, that those are people who are near and dear to Facebook internally, that were in part responsible for its success, that have now turned around and done a 180. And my point is that China and Russia know very goddamn well they have weaponized social media in America against America itself. And so they don't want to potentially see that happening to them. And this is the CCP's taking the necessary steps to prevent the possibility that could happen in China. And Russia is saying that Putin has said publicly on the record, it's published, that he believes America is using YouTube to poison the minds of, not poison the minds, but to inspire, provocate to protest in Russia. He attributes a lot of the protests for democracy, and he's not the only one. There's a lot of authoritarian regimes who blame American social media as the instigators of the protests. In their.
Sorry, Tyler, I just tweeted to you an article from 2020 Pew Research study. I'm sure we probably have covered it earlier, but even 64% of Americans feel social media is bad for society.
Yeah,
right?
the junk food comparison has been made for a very long time in terms of the diet metaphor of novels, consuming books at a library, is like real food, and consuming, Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat is, you could even go further. It's not only junk food, it's hardcore drugs. It's cocaine and heroin.
Yeah, we can't even ban soda, so go figure.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
it could
but
also
school
be
districts
seen as
do.
more like smoking. Like where for minors, they can't go and buy cigarettes, and so while I don't agree with the slippery slope of, hey, let's just start really regulating too much, because again, we've learned from this experience this last few years that even you just can't let your puritanical grandmother make these decisions. But I was going to say that smoking for a long time was allowed for children, and they could go buy cigarettes, right? And we learned it was bad for children. We don't have that data from a public health perspective yet. I think convincing data, because there has been some conflicting data from Harvard and other places showing that kids actually have more social isolation and depression. I think it's anecdotal. We don't have the data yet. And I just do wonder if that data does present itself, whether it will be seen as a public health thing, just like smoking was.
Let's hope we can get there. Yeah. So the next big story is from the Financial Times. They say they have sources that the EU will launch a formal probe early next month into NVIDIA's planned $54 billion takeover of ARM, as NVIDIA sets formal submission date in the week of September 6th. And this is about big chip manufacturers and consolidation in the big chip manufacturing space. The next one is from The Verge. Twitter starts rolling out ticketed spaces for some iOS users. Hosts can charge between $1 and $1,000 for their ticketed rooms and set a room size limit. So you could set up a room for any number of seats in the room, and you can charge anywhere from $1 to $999 per seat in that room. And there's no limit on the size. You could leave it unlimited if you want in terms of size. And they claim that they can hold an unlimited number of listeners in a room. So, in fact, I've been in a room that had 22,000 listeners once. So, yeah, they can do a lot. The question is, could they do 1 million? Because Elon Musk could jump in a room and say, I'm talking about Bitcoin, and I'm charging, $100 to come listen into my sincere thoughts about Dogecoin or Bitcoin. Holy cow. Not that he needs money, but you have a lot of musicians who you think are wealthy, who are not, who have a huge millions of fans on Twitter. And now on their Twitter account with their 100 million fans, there's a lot of people with 100 million followers on Twitter who can now say, hey, I'm jumping in this room. I'm going to do Kanye could do a private performance in a ticketed Twitter space. And If you look at the 100 most followed people on Twitter, I could see a lot of them doing private rooms and charging to enter them, and they could perform or provide information or advice or whatever it is. So this could get very big very quickly. Of course, Spotify could do the same. Clubhouse could do the same. Twitter just uniquely has an incredible number of active celebrities on the platform, and politicians, and all kinds of interesting folks who might now start monetizing their intimate thoughts in a closed ticketed spaces, as they say. So interesting to see how that unfolds. The next one is from the South China Morning Post. It says, holy cow, this is not only is the first time we've had 3 in the top list, we've now have 4. So this is truly unprecedented. And I don't know if this speaks to geeks elsewhere starting to realize the relevance of China. In some sense it does, I guess. It says, a look at China's turbulent relationship with its domestic gaming industry as it continues to crack down on Tencent, which is the biggest player in video games, while laying out plans for global growth. China's domestic gaming revenues in 2020 rose to 278 billion yuan, with almost half of the country now playing video games. Oh boy. After an article in state media video called video games spiritual porn, an investor sell-off saw nearly $100 billion wiped off the value of Tencent and gaming stocks, because they're worried there's going to be a huge crackdown like there was on the edtech space. And there might be, because this seems related. This seems like we don't like the poisoning of the future generation of China. And we're going to actually do something about it. Unlike the Americans who just, turn a complete blind eye to it and, turn themselves into a country who can't agree on anything and can't even agree on the simple fact of getting a vaccine to stop a pandemic. We would never, ever risk that ever happening in China. So we got to nip this in the bud. And, let's that. You read the headline with controlling the algorithms on all the social media, but they also want to control the video games. So it says, when Communist Party mouthpieces People's Daily and Xinhua News Agency published 8 articles in 1 week in 2017 comparing Tencent Holdings' hit mobile game Honor of Kings to poisonous drugs, founder and CEO Pony Ma took action. On July 14, 2017, the gaming and social media tycoon went to Beijing to meet with the editors responsible for wiping out nearly $17 billion from his company's market value. Fuck me. Holy shit. Can you imagine a journalist wiping out nearly $18 billion of your company's value with an article? Holy shit. So, yeah, no doubt he went to have a talk with them. People's Daily greeted the billionaire with standard practice courtesy for a person of his status. A massive LED panel displayed a digital welcome banner, while photos of Mr. Ma and the paper's senior leaders quickly went viral. No information was released about the content of the meeting. At the same time as Ma's visit, Tencent was busy introducing stringent new rules for child and teenage gamers, at the time calling them the most serious anti-addiction measures in history. State media pressure eased, and the company eventually went to capture 40% of China's gaming market, propelling Tencent stock to another 170% to a record over the next 3 years and putting $1 trillion market capitalization briefly within sight. Tencent has not only been, by the way, America only has $2 trillion companies, Apple and Microsoft, just to give you context for how big Tencent is. So Tencent has not only been clever in developing and publishing blockbusters, cultivating an increasingly incredibly scaled audience and branching into two different verticals such as esports and gaming, says an old friend of mine, Sir Toto from Japan, chief executive of consultancy Kantan Games. The company has also been strategic in complying with local laws and regulations. And now, as China's video game industry sees strong growth amid a world locked inside, a new wave of concerns once again puts on display Beijing's love-hate relationship with the digital pastime, as well as Tencent's ability to navigate an increasingly complex regulatory environment. Between Ma's fateful Beijing meeting in 2017 and this February, not only did Tencent's market cap nearly triple to just under $1 trillion, China has also risen to become the world's biggest video game market in the world. In 2020, China's domestic gaming, who cares? Tencent's dominating share of the global games market translated to 43 billion yuan in 2021, equivalent to around a third of the company's total sales. With the support of multiple games, China has laid out plans to game as well. So protecting the youth. Here it is. At this year's 2 sessions in March, President Xi Jinping explicitly listed game addiction as a concern for the psychological health of the country's teens. The article from state media that called Honor King's spiritual opium was taken as a signal that the sector could be Beijing's next target, and investors sell-off saw nearly $100 billion wiped off the value of gaming stocks. Holy shit, $100 billion. Tencent alone lost $43 billion in a matter of hours. Since its high in February, has lost more than $400 billion. Oh my God. Holy shit. Can you imagine Apple losing half of its value in a few months? Once again, the company found itself facing down a regulatory storm and could obliterate its most reliable revenue driver. And just like in 2017, it was ahead of the curve, quickly announcing further limits on players of Honor Kings under the age of 18. And another commentary from People's Daily took a jab at Tencent, arguing that youth modes deployed by Chinese internet platforms to protect teenagers from gaming addiction and inappropriate short videos do not go far enough. While the youth modes have apparently accumulated a significant number of users, many problems still persist, with some youth modes being criticized by parents as existing in name only. Anyway, they're smaller developers in China, all in games. They're cracking down. Tencent
Yeah, Tyler, this game addiction, it's become mainstream when if you go to webmd.com, they have an entire section on game addiction.
Tencent, as the biggest gaming company in the world and having direct influence and ownership over many studios worldwide, might function as a Beijing spear to spread its influence, said Shenzhen-based consultant Camillo. Just like Hollywood molded worldviews and perceptions all over the planet in favor of an American-centric perspective, it is legitimate to assume that Beijing has similar plans, including through gaming. Oh, there you go. So Tencent is the biggest investor in game platforms globally, in game studios. And TikTok is the biggest social media app. So this guy from Shenzhen in China says Beijing's going to use their position in the video game market globally to create a similar, I love this quote. Just like Hollywood molded worldviews and perceptions all over the planet in favor of an American-centric perspective, it is legitimate to assume that Beijing has similar plans through the video games and TikTok, because they now have one of the 3 board seats on TikTok, and Tencent's the biggest investor in video games globally. So watch out for your next video game. Well, by the way, it's very well known in Hollywood that Beijing is also now one of the super investors in all Hollywood movies. And you cannot do anything in a Hollywood movie today that would even potentially upset Beijing. And everyone in Hollywood knows it. You cannot have any mention of Taiwan in any Hollywood movie. You cannot have a Taiwanese flag. By the way, Top Gun, an old classic movie in America, in Tom Cruise's jacket, there's a tiny Taiwanese flag. That's gone. And you can't even see it. You didn't even know it's there. You've watched that movie a million times. You'll never notice it. And China, you really never notice it because they take it out. But that's an obvious example. They go through they get right in, just like they're controlling the algorithms of the social media platforms in China. They're controlling the actual scripts and narratives of Hollywood movies in Hollywood. No, we don't like any mention of this or that. They just go through with a red pen, and it's like much of the stuff they're editing out has really nothing to do with China or Taiwan directly, but they just don't like you mentioning or this and all kinds of things. They are now a co-producer of your film. If you allow, even if you don't, and if you take the investment from the Chinese investors, which by the way are connected to the state, no surprise, they want influence in Hollywood's amazing ability to shape narratives globally. And they see Hollywood as a puppet of the American, creating this, why the world loves America is because of Hollywood. So they want a piece of that action, and now they have it. But more interestingly, even if they don't directly invest in the film, if you want to show your film in China, which is a huge market, You still got to do what they want to do, or your film doesn't exist. So even if you don't take their money, you're still going to play by their rules. So 4 of the top stories are all China. That's really interesting. We've never had more than one, I don't think, in the top. Some maybe 2, not 4. Never had 3, let alone 4. So the next one's from the Washington Post. Analysis: targeted ad campaigns on Facebook, long criticized as invasive, have become powerful tools for health officials to persuade people to get vaccinated. Targeted ad campaigns, long criticized as invasive, and let's crack this one open for a second. In an ad shown to people Facebook thinks are college-educated conservatives in Oklahoma, coronavirus vaccination is touted as trusted by the U.S. military and by our greatest generation. In another, Facebook users interested in the Catholic Church are told that Pope Francis says getting vaccinated is the moral choice. Still, another tells fans of beer and country music it's okay to question. Now get the facts on coronavirus vaccines. And so you kind of get the idea here. At least 35 government agencies, nonprofits, and corporations and public figures have purchased ads with different pro-vaccination messages, each set to reach and hopefully persuade Americans based on characteristics such as political affiliation, cultural identity, and hobbies. A Washington Post analysis of Facebook's ad data has found the practice, known as micro-targeted advertising, is one of the internet's biggest boogeymen and has long been criticized as invasive, discriminatory, and divisive. But the ad technique in which marketers use tech companies' data to show certain messages only to people with specific interests and traits has also become an important tool in the battle to boost vaccination rates across America. It's unclear how effective the ad campaigns have been at encouraging vaccine holdouts to change their minds. Many of the ad campaigns run through the spring and summer as vaccination rates sagged across the country. Health authorities are newly hopeful that the full approval Monday of Pfizer's vaccine by the Food and Drug Administration will convince more Americans to roll up their sleeves, but public health officials say the widespread use of micro-targeting reflects the recognition that groups with different values, motivations, and personal taste require more than a one-size-fits-all approach amid the country's polarized political debates. So, interesting, that one. The next is a company called Overjet, which creates AI-based software for dental clinics, raises $27 million. Then Axios has this one. As federal government prepares to deploy $42 billion for broadband development, the money will flow to states via the Commerce Department, bypassing the FCC. And the next one says venture into Indian internet startups raised a record $20 billion this year across 576 deals, surpassing the $13 billion from 878 deals in 2019 already. And it's nearly doubled it, and it will probably triple it by the end of the year. And then the next one says a look at El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin as a national currency on September 7th, giving citizens $30 to sign up for the government's Chivo wallet and other potential issues. And Berkshire Hathaway-backed Brazilian bank called Nubank is seeking evaluation at $55 billion for its U.S. IPO. And which helps Workstream, which helps SMBs hire frontline and deskless workers by using text messages, raises $48 million. Reddit CEO responds after calls from Reddit users, to purge the site of COVID-19 disinformation, saying that dissent is part of Reddit and the foundation of democracy. And because there was a huge letter written on behalf with a whole bunch of signatories of Reddit communities and users saying, hey, Reddit, you got to get all of this COVID disinformation off of Reddit. And they responded saying, no, we don't. Dissent is part of Reddit and the foundation of democracy. Quite an interesting response indeed. And then Snapchat updates this is a big one. Snapchat updates itself, what they call the scan feature. The scan feature now turns Snapchat into a visual search engine that identifies many things in the real world, like clothing items or dog breeds. And I'll tweet this out so you can see it, but essentially they have a video as well. Snapchat can now identify objects and allows you to click and buy those objects. And that's incredibly interesting, more than you could probably ever imagine, because Snapchat also is very big in AR, augmented reality. They have their own Snap glasses they call spectacles. And so now, combining the two technologies, you could walk down the street. Every single thing you see is clickable and buyable instantly in Snapchat. And this is now live in their phone app, the Snap app. You hold up your phone, you walk around, anything you point at, you can now buy. So now Snapchat is now competing with Amazon. Snapchat was competing with Twitter and Facebook. Now they're competing with Amazon. Do you have any idea how much more money that is for Snapchat? That makes Snapchat worth about 10 times more today than it was worth yesterday. They did this by partnering with Shopify. By the way, so did TikTok in the past 48 hours. By the way, so did Instagram. By the way, so did every social media app and Pinterest, and all of them are all partnering. That e-commerceification of social media is being enabled by Shopify. That's why Shopify stock is one of the best performing stocks over the past year, because this is truly phenomenal that all of these social media apps, and this is just genius partnering on Shopify's part. Shopify built the e-commerce engine, and then instead of competing as a destination like Amazon has done, they've earned the right to be a destination. You go to Amazon directly. Rather than try and convince consumers to go to Shopify.com, they just partner with where all the people already are, which is social media. So they've done that, and they helped social media go into a whole new e-commerceification era of what we call social commerce, or SOCOM if you want to keep it short. But this is huge. It's huge. It's huge in China. It's worth billions in China. And this already happened in China starting about 3 years ago. And it's tremendous. And it already, the company who did it in China, Pinduoduo, already is as big as their version of Amazon, which is Alibaba. And so it is no exaggeration at all to say that a company, Shopify, will be as big as Amazon. This already happened in China. The company, the Shopify of China, did become as big as the Amazon of China, which is Alibaba. So watch the fuck out. Here it comes. It's here. And Snap the scan feature is now the prominent feature inside of, they're really shifting Snapchat from being about sharing little bits of content to scanning things. That's what the article says, that the scan feature is now the main feature in the app is the scan feature. Well, now you know why, because they're pivoting themselves from a cute little image sharing app into a buy everything around you right now app with glasses coming soon. So now you don't even fuck with your phone, but keep that in your pocket, put on the glasses. You see something you like, you click the button on the frame, as they say in the article. And there you buy it right there. Boom, you're done without ever leaving. And it's, by the way, Pokemon Go is an AR app, and Pokemon Go has their own glasses. Do you think they might go into this space, or you think they're just going to play cute little video games? And now you know why Facebook is becoming a metaverse company and not a social media company. It's this social shopping thing is so tremendous, it's hard to overestimate it. So watch out, it's coming, and there's huge financial upside for those who have figured this out. So the next big story is Apple Watch active user base is now over 100 million globally, and the smart watch market grew 27% year over year. And Apple launches the News Partner Program, which lowers commissions on in-app purchases for subscribing to magazines and newspapers inside of the Apple News app. No one uses that, so who cares? And then the Wall Street Journal has an interview with somebody named John Binns, a 21-year-old American living in Turkey who claims responsibility for the recent T-Mobile hacks of 50 million T-Mobile users that he was selling on the dark web. And he says that T-Mobile security is awful. And he says he's not even that good of a hacker, to highlight how bad T-Mobile security is. And then TSMC, the world's biggest semiconductor, saying they're going to raise their prices by 10% for their advanced chips and 20% for their less advanced chips. And after a White House meeting, Google will spend $10 billion. That was yesterday's headline. So that's your big, boring headlines for Friday, August 27th. But who cares? Because we get to the good stuff, which is all the really interesting headlines that we, as the geeks of the world, have found on Twitter in the past 24 hours. And before I jump into them, does anyone have a particular one that they've seen in the past 24 hours they want to make sure that we jump into right off the top?
I just DM you something. You
Okay.
check whether if it's newsworthy.
Okay.
And Tyler, I just tweeted out with your tech news around the world.
Okay.
About China and big data, which you've been talking about, that
Go ahead.
they're banning IPO of big tech from China in USA.
Yes, that was one of the top 10 stories today. So,
Tyler,
yes.
there's one that's interesting from just now. Early Uber investor Bill Gurley takes personal position in Ethereum.
Yes, I just mentioned Bill 30 minutes ago.
Am I like the crazy one that didn't hear you say that?
Maybe. I said here's a tweet from Bill Gurley commenting on the China story.
I found him. Well, then he must have tweeted it out. There goes to show you the proof is in the pudding. Going to Twitter because
Bill's the guy that I said is one of the best minds in tech in Silicon Valley, and as an investor, and was a board member on Uber.
Cool.
I mentioned it 30 minutes ago.
Bill's
amazing. Bill is one of the sharpest minds in tech, period. And he's one of the best.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes. Ethereum, then.
Yeah.
Hey, Tyler. I shared a couple of disturbing stories about our friends at Facebook.
Okay.
Just a moment ago, one to do with facial recognition in Korea, the other to do with their out-of-control ivermectin cure groups. So that might be of interest.
I've got that
folks.
one. And then, May, are you saying that Bill Gurley's now an advisor to Vitalik at Ethereum, essentially?
No, he's basically taking a personal position in Ethereum himself, which basically means he's putting his stamp, in my opinion. It says, let me skim it through, but on this, while I'm skimming, the CMO from Facebook went to Coinbase. Okay. I got that in my LinkedIn updates through my network.
Okay.
But this says venture capitalists confessed that he was pretty late to the crypto party, but Ethereum's community has won him over.
Okay.
He said main factors that led tech investor Bill Gurley to invest in the number 2 cryptocurrency. I have to say I was swayed by the arguments of the Ethereum crowd. I've taken a personal position, not something at benchmark. Looks like he's eventually, blah, blah, blah. Unlike his early bet, Gurley has acknowledged that he came kind of late to the world of crypto as he's busy with other things and didn't spend a lot of time on it. That changed in last April when he dedicated quite a bit of time listening and reading, during which he developed a keen interest in Ethereum.
Okay.
He was swayed by the crowd. The parties that are involved seem to be way more pragmatic. They seem to be open to change and are basically making several changes, which I think will bring down fees and will be very beneficial. The developer community is clearly in the Ethereum camp.
Okay.
Pew, pew, pew.
There you go. So Cheryl sent in one from the Global Times in China, which is a very government-friendly publication. And the headline says, works of scandals hit actress Zhao Wei removed from platforms following ban on actor Zheng Zhehan for visiting Yasukuni Shrine. And the Yasukuni Shrine is the Japanese shrine that recognized the success of the Japanese warriors over China, I guess, Cheryl?
The place where they commemorate the wall.
Yeah.
The war.
They're
soldiers,
yes.
They're soldiers,
and by the way, every time
every time
yes.
the Prime Minister of Japan visits
Correct.
that place,
that's the one.
Korea
yes.
and China will protest. Yeah.
Right. That's the one. That's the one I was thinking of. There's a shrine in Japan that the Prime Minister goes to every year, and every year that it's to recognize the efforts of fallen Japanese service people, and who were very fought. Many consider that they say they committed war crimes in China and Korea. And so when the Prime Minister goes there to pay respects to the fallen veterans of Japan, the Chinese and the Koreans say, how dare you go pay homage to these Chinese soldiers who, raped our women and etc. So it becomes this crazy Asian political drama each year when the prime minister goes to do that. So the interesting thing here is that a Chinese actor went to the shrine. Yes? Chinese billionaire actress Zhao Wei's name has been removed from many of the works she starred in on major Chinese video platforms, and many of the films, talk shows, and TV series she acted in were also removed from the platforms as of Thursday night. She is the latest celebrity whose works have been taken down after actor Zhang Zehan, who came under fire for visiting Japan's notorious Yasukuni Shrine. Zhao, who's the woman here, not the guy who went to the shrine, who became the Italian luxury fashion brand Fendi's China's brand spokesperson in 2020, is one of China's most well-known actresses who has been entangled in various scandals over the year. Many netizens wrote on social media since Thursday night that searching Zhao's name on many major Chinese video platforms such as Tencent Video showed no results, and her works, including My Fair Princess, which was dubbed one of the most popular Chinese TV dramas of all times, has been taken down from several platforms which did not give explanation. On other platforms, Zhao's name was simply removed from the cast. Disappeared retroactively. That's fantastic. According to Hubei-based news media Jimu News, several video platforms confirmed the removal of Zhao's works, saying they received the request at a short notice and without a clear reason. Well, it hurt Uncle Xi's feelings, so she's got to disappear. She never existed. So topics like
Tyler,
yes,
with the tech, they could probably digitally face tune these people. Basically, put a different face on them during a movie.
They better yet just remove any evidence of their existence, which is what happened to Jimmy Lai, the publisher of Apple Daily. He had the publication in Hong Kong, Apple Daily. He's an outspoken critic of the CCP. He got arrested, disappeared, and then he had written books. And after he was disappeared into a prison cell, magically his books were also disappeared from the bookstore shelves, physical bookstore shelves. However, this is Hong Kong, not China. Hong Kong has freedom of speech, or it did until relatively recently, but those books still exist to buy on the internet, right? So now this is where it gets really interesting. Is China now going to bring these same tactics that we're reading in this headline of disappearing people completely from the internet to Hong Kong, where there are a lot of critics of the CCP still in Hong Kong who dare to speak out? But will they be erased and put into prison cells, and their existence on not only their books and bookstore shelves, but their books on e-commerce platforms and disappear? And why is that so interesting? Because then the CCP is controlling Hong Kong's internet. And that means you soon have the Chinese internet coming to Hong Kong, which means Tiananmen Square never existed, and the whole kit and caboodle. No Western apps, all completely controlled. Register your face to get on the Chinese apps. All of it. Where does it stop? You can't just stop by removing the 2 books of this person. You got to remove every mention of them from every web page. And that's very difficult to do on an open Western internet. Shit. Okay. So our only real option is to just bring the Chinese firewall internet to Hong Kong, which, by the way, is supposed to still, according to the law, it still has freedom of speech, 2 systems. So, yeah, it's amazing how this works, and
But isn't it in their interest to keep 2 systems, 1 country?
I don't, it seems debatable based on their actions.
After the protests, I think China basically made up their mind. They're like, we're taking this thing back and we don't care.
Yeah, but to enforce it, of course, they silenced everybody on the ground physically, but then you need to silence them on the internet as well. And how do you do that when it's an open internet?
That was, didn't they? I mean, that was where they went to the university and tried to cut the cable.
Correct.
Right?
That's exactly right. because the cables come into Hong Kong at Hong Kong University, or the Chinese Hong Kong University. So, and then the students ran there to protect the cables from being cut. And
So I mean, China's just done. I mean, that's what, while we're out here working on things, they've made up their mind.
Amazing to see how they disappear people when they do things they don't like. So the next, we went through the big articles. Now we go through the interesting articles. And the first one that I have here is from Lucast. These are random. I'm tweeting these out to the Tech News Twitter account in real time as we go through them rather quickly at TNATW. So please follow the Tech News Twitter account to see these articles that I'm tweeting out in real time. Here's the first one from Daily Mail UK. Just 79, UK's vanishing high street. 83% of department stores shut down in the past 5 years. Just 79 of the main shops in Britain remain open compared to 467 5 years ago. Wow. 83% are closed. The rest will likely close as we get into this whole, you know that whole Snapchat buy everything when people are walking down the street? Why do you need fucking stores when every piece of thing anybody's wearing, or every bicycle going by, every umbrella, water bottle, table, chair, all that shit is, you don't need a store anymore at that point. The entire world you're walking through is a store. Everything's purchasable with one click.
So Tyler, why is Amazon getting into retail?
Because it's now completely they're very clever. Two interesting reasons, because that was a headline that came out last week. One is they need a physical place for returns to make it like a Genius Bar for Amazon. They also need a place to, supermarkets can't really be replaced fully for produce reasons. So to take advantage of that, they put cameras everywhere in the stores and get eye tracking and more data about you than they ever had before once you walk into the physical store. And the stores no longer require staff. They've made staffless stores, so the costs are way, 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 way lower than any of their competitors because they don't have staff. And they get a lot more data out of the stores. So the amount of sensors and cameras and palm print reading and all of that stuff in the stores gives them a lot of valuable data with no staff, and the rents have never been cheaper. And they have.
Doesn't it make sense to traditional online companies to emulate Amazon and get into physical brick and mortar?
If they could
emulating that practice, if they can do it.
If they could emulate everything I'm describing, but it takes a really tech savvy company to do those things that I just described.
Well, hence the traditional versus the digital first. Like
right.
Wayfair,
Precisely right. Exactly the main argument I've made so many times. If you the data companies win. If your company is data and cloud-based from its origins, and then extrapolates into brick and mortar, that you will still dominate because everyone they're competing against doesn't have all of these massive weapons. It's the equivalent of somebody with tanks and machine guns competing with people with butter knives. It's an absurd asymmetrical advantage that all of the data that Amazon has. So it's I hope that answered that question. But anyway, the next big article is not big, interesting article from Lucas is that Microsoft Azure, which is their cloud, like AWS is Amazon Web Services, that's Amazon's cloud, and they have Google Cloud. Those are the three big clouds. And the headline from The Verge says Microsoft Azure cloud vulnerability is worse than you can imagine. Full read, write, delete access was open to several thousand Microsoft Azure customers. Swiss cheese. I need a little sound file every time we have the Microsoft vulnerability story of the day to remind everybody that it's Swiss cheese. That was your hourly reminder that Microsoft is Swiss cheese when it comes to security. And I told you, and there's more. That was this hour's. There's another one next hour. The next one is from the Daily Mail. British Land, which I guess is a company, or an agency. British Land buys a 20 20 million pound car park, so about $25 million car park. That's a parking lot. So British Land buys a $25 million parking lot to turn it into a delivery hub. And what's a delivery hub? That's a whole bunch of logistics that's strategically placed just on the outside of town where the cheap rent is. And you just build up a little 4 walls, and it's a bunch of robots fulfilling your order and putting it into an autonomous little vehicle that zooms to your house in 30 minutes. And by the way, did I not just read that all of the department stores are shutting down? Oh, I did? Oh, I wonder if these are related, these two headlines. Oh, 83% of the department stores are shutting down, and somebody's paying $25 million for a car park to convert it into an online delivery hub. Oh, an e-commerce fulfillment center. Oh, I see. The property firm said the underground site in Finsbury Square near Moorgate Station is the ideal location for a last-mile logistics hub serving central London. Oh, you mean like an autonomous car is going to bring me my stuff that I ordered on the internet 30 minutes ago? Dope, bro. That's cool. Yeah. And it was brought there by an autonomous driving semi-truck. And the order was fulfilled by a bunch of robots. So the next big headline is from Poppy. And I love this one. Nigeria students develop 2 female Nigerian students develop wearable technology to address abductions of school children. Nigerian students develop wearable tech to address 2 female students in Nigeria have developed the idea of products that use wearable technology to help abate abductions of school children in the country. That's the child slavery thing, or child sex in slavery industry.
I think Tyler, if that's the same as what I sent you a couple of days ago, what those 2 girls did is actually they developed a company with an app, and then you have a wearable that would have security for kidnapping.
Right.
So that the Boko Haram and stuff, when they do that, it would alert friends and family.
Correct.
So that they can try to do some action and save them.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly right.
And they won big amount, like close
right.
to $1 million. It's a global competition. And
Yep.
and they won like from 7,000, I think, submissions from 80 countries. And then they will get some money and mentoring and stuff to get it going. And they're just high school students.
Yep. It's fantastic. So the next one is about a 12-year-old coder is set to earn over $400,000 after 2 months of selling NFTs. Benjamin Ahmed isn't your average 12-year-old. His hobbies include coding and building NFTs collections, and he's made over $400,000 in the last couple months. And then somebody just sent in this one, Professor Asif, if I recall. Yeah, about this one from Reuters, that an Iraqi cleric, Sadr, says he will participate in general election in Iraq. The Iraqi populist Shiite Muslim cleric Muqtada al-Sadr said on Friday that he and his supporters would take part in the October general election, reversing a decision last month to stay out. And Sadr's bloc is part of a coalition that holds the most seats in parliament now and is likely to be one of the front runners in the vote, which was called early by Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi as a response to popular protests in 2019. And what do you make of this, Professor Asif? Or Faraz, maybe you have a comment on a cleric running for the leadership of Iraq.
Well, it's all about Iran, I think. I think Iran's growing
Yeah,
power in Iraq
ditto.
is the
That's it.
challenge.
Yeah, I was just raising the question, is this another one of those that like Afghanistan's gone to Taliban, now Iraq will go to Iran? That was my point.
Of which remain in Iraq, a position at odds with many rival Shiite politicians and armed groups who are loyal to Tehran. Yeah, so it's pushing things. Is he's Shiite? shape policy in the armed groups.
So all this has been great news for Iran, whether it's
Yeah.
the Taliban coming to power in Afghanistan or the Shiite power in Iraq. Iran's setting up quite an empire, with its relationships
Which
in the
is
region
to the detriment of Saudi Arabia, I guess, because it's a bit
and
of
the U.S.
Sunni
and
versus
Israel.
Shiite, if you to oversimplify it.
Yeah, but it's more to do with us, US and UK as well.
Okay, so the next one is from Evan. This one from PC Mag this is funny. Amazon urges the FCC to deny SpaceX's plan for a second-generation Starlink.
LOL.
Amazon's own satellite broadband company Kuiper Systems claims SpaceX's proposal for the second-generation Starlink are too broad and speculative. Well, it already has 100,000 paying customers, by the way. And
I don't know if you saw Elon Musk's tweet about
yes,
Jeff
don't
Bezos basically.
ruin the surprise. I'm intentionally holding that one. So Amazon's asking the FCC to deny SpaceX plans to develop Starlink network, claiming it breaks the regulator's rules on satellite deployment. Amazon's protest letter comes as the company is developing its own satellite internet system called Project Kuiper, or who knows how that word's pronounced, which has yet to take off. Maybe because of rockets, Jeff. Starlink, on the other hand, is already serving 100,000 users across the globe with 1,700 satellites in orbit. The network is currently delivering download speeds from 500 megabytes per second to 150 megabytes per second or higher. But to improve coverage and upgrade speed, SpaceX is seeking FCC clearance to operate a second-generation Starlink network comprised of 30,000 satellites. Amazon claims the plan is too broad and speculative and thus breaks the FCC's rules on applying for satellite deployments. The e-commerce giant notes that SpaceX application for the second-generation network seeks permission for not just one but two configurations to align the 30,000 Starlink satellites. SpaceX already intends on using one configuration during the actual deployment. The company's FCC application also notes the second proposed configuration is meant to serve as a backup. Wow. Nevertheless, Amazon isn't on board with the justifications. SpaceX's novel approach of applying for two mutually exclusive configurations is at odds with both the Commission's rules and public policy, and we urge the Commission to dismiss the amendment. Amazon says in the letter, the Commission's rules require that SpaceX settle the details of its proposed amendment before filing its application, not after. As a result, Amazon is calling on the FCC to dismiss the plan in the current form. According to Amazon, relaxing the rules risks encouraging SpaceX and other companies to seek clearance for speculative applications that try to lock in access for various satellite configurations. So Jeff is trying to stop Elon with the satellites, and Elon has a very clever tweet that Evan was about to mention, saying that I want to find it exactly because the way he phrased it is quite funny. Do you have it handy?
I don't. I'm driving. Sorry, I can count.
I have so many tabs open on my browser, it'll take me forever to find it. But he basically says that Jeff Bezos retired from Amazon to focus full time on filing lawsuits, which is funny because he's filed quite a few now against SpaceX since retiring from Amazon a month ago. Where is it? There it is. Bezos retired in order to pursue a full-time job filing lawsuits against SpaceX, which is quite a funny jab. But it turns out Bezos retired in order to pursue a full-time job filing lawsuits against SpaceX. Replying to a story about the later complaint, Musk tweeted, earlier this month, Bezos' space firm Blue Origin sued NASA after it lost a critical government contract to put astronauts on the moon, and they lost that to SpaceX. This has been the effect of delaying SpaceX's own work on the project, and now, this week, Amazon has urged the FCC to dismiss newly submitted plans by SpaceX to launch another cluster of satellites. Replying to the story about it, Elon Musk sent out the tweet. Turns out Bezos retired in order to pursue a full-time job filing lawsuits against SpaceX. It's quite funny. So the next big story, and thank you for Dr. Fran for sending that one in. The next one is Evan, you sent in this one from the Wall Street Journal about researchers ready a lab-grown COVID Delta variant for human challenger trials.
Yeah, is Dr. Danish on the stage to
Yeah,
talk
I
about
hope
what
so. Or
challenger
John. Yeah,
trials are?
this one's
Because they're
wild.
a
Yeah, exactly.
fascinating
It says British
approach to.
researchers are making progress growing a carefully controlled batch in the lab that they hope to use to infect volunteers.
I mean, we should have done this at the beginning of the pandemic. I don't know why it took so long to come up with volunteers to basically be infected with the virus to test antivirals and vaccines against Delta and other variants.
Yeah, we have no shortage.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have no shortage of infected people now. Why would we need to make a lab version?
I haven't seen the article. Is this an attenuated version? Is that
I'll read it here. It says, while the rest of the world's trying to stamp out COVID Delta variant, British researchers are making progress growing a carefully controlled batch in the lab that they hope to use to infect volunteers in studies. The effort marks a new phase in the UK's human challenge trials, the only COVID-19 studies in the world intentionally exposing participants to the virus with the goal of developing new vaccines and treatments. Other researchers are also isolating and growing COVID variant specimens for study. U.S. government-funded scientists are producing variants for research, but not for use in humans. The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease officials said 2 COVID challenge trials sponsored by the Imperial College London and University of Oxford started earlier this year in the UK. They so far have exposed more than 40 healthy young volunteers under isolated medical supervision to the original Wuhan strain that circulated widely in 2020. Funny that they call it the original Wuhan strain in this article. Since then, the highly transmissible...
Don't call it gain-of-function research. That would get us in trouble. Just call it something else.
Since then, the highly transmissible Delta variant has come to dominate infections globally, rendering vaccines less effective and boosting case numbers across the US, UK, and elsewhere. Delta's fast rise led researchers in UK challenge trial partner HVivo Services Limited to focus on trying to grow a variant in the lab. With colleagues in the Netherlands, HVivo has coaxed the Delta strain to mature through the seed stage, said Andrew Catchpole, HVivo's chief scientific officer and virologist who oversees the virus manufacturing. The London clinical research firm is continuing to grow the batch of millimeter by millimeter from specimen specimen taken from an infected human. There's almost enough volume of the lab-grown virus for initial testing, he said, though the process has been trickier than with other strains. Delta has been more difficult. Not all clinical samples grow as readily in cell cultures. At each stage, researchers screen for mutations and contaminations. The virus is contained and can't be allowed to evolve differently from what is naturally circulating, he said.
Yeah, and I hadn't read that article, but I read some of the articles from 6 months ago when they were launching this program. And, it would be brilliant if they can quickly and safely identify some therapies that really work as a backstop to all the breakthrough infections. However, the concerns I had then, I still have. One, if they use the Wuhan variant as a model, they need to attack portions of the virus that are not on the spike protein, and that seems to be one of the best targets. But they wouldn't want to do that because there's been so many mutations since the original Wuhan virus that any therapy that might work in individuals challenged with the original variant might not work with the Delta variant. The second thing is that in order to really test against the Delta variant, and now there's at least 3 post Delta variants that appear to be as infectious and perhaps more virulent and lethal, that you wouldn't want to challenge anybody with because of their increased infectivity and lethality, number one. Number two, if in fact they were to infect enough people to really test a wide variety of candidate drugs, a fixed percentage of them will likely develop the long haul syndrome, including brain fog with brain lesions. And the ethics of that kind of approach will come under enormous scrutiny. So kudos to them for thinking about how to accelerate the evolution of new therapeutics. But let's hope their informed consent for their participants includes the risk of damaging their brain in ways that leave them unable to work for many, many months, if not many, many years. So that's a pretty dicey program.
Hey, John, I got a question for you. The PCR test, are there samples of the original virus for that test, like the actual virus, or is it a pseudovirus
Hold
that
that
was
thought.
used for measurement?
I want John to answer that, but before he does, I want to just share a headline because I have to run out for 3 minutes and run back, and then we can double. This will increase my chance of keeping the conversation going while I'm away. So please do answer that, John. But also this headline about ivermectin flying off North Texas shelves as COVID-19 remedy, despite FDA's warnings and side effects. For the past month or so, store managers has watched new customers trickle in the Irving feed store, or yeah, all looking for ivermectin. So it's why they can't keep it on the shelves in Texas. So if you can comment on both of these, thanks.
Sure, happy to. So, with respect to the PCR assay, how it was developed vis-a-vis the original virus, um, we because we're sequencing all the variants, we know the amino acid sequence of every variant that's produced by the RNA, and we know for those that are transcribed, we know um, the way we can reproduce the way the original PCRs were developed. PCR, by the way, is recognizes a diagnostic uh, segment of the virus, but it's not the whole virus by any stretch. Which is why you can be PCR positive long after you no longer have contagious viral particles. So to answer your question, it's pretty easy from just the data of the sequencing of the virus to know how to reconstruct, modify any of these PCR tests, but they use a starter segment um, of the RNA for developing the reverse transcriptase RT PCR polymerase chain reaction. So that's not a problem. The data banks we have are more than sufficient to do any combination permutation with any of the variants. The second question around ivermectin is it again it really reflects um, a lot of the loss of empiric scientific trust in empiric scientific evidence that has emerged from many sources, including social media. And the reason that the CDC and the NIH and the researchers in this space have put the brakes on ivermectin is because if you look at the sum total of all the studies, and if you look at those that have been conducted with really rigorous scientific methods that are more credible, um, all of the major reviews of the literature on ivermectin suggest that while there are some very small studies, often with very poor methodologies, have in isolation shown benefit of ivermectin, when you look at the whole of the literature, it's pretty tenuous to say that there's a clear benefit. That doesn't stop people who have whatever belief systems that prevent them from getting the vaccine from wanting to believe for obvious reasons that they can protect themselves by taking ivermectin on a chronic basis. Um, it's the science behind the analysis is so difficult that it doesn't lend itself to a fair public debate to people outside of the research community to understand the pitfalls of the methodologies, both within studies and across studies. So it's going to remain a very controversial issue simply because I can't sit down with an ivermectin advocate and in less than 2 hours go through point by point the pitfalls and shortcomings of the studies that they will cite, and they can cite lots of studies that seem to show an advantage of ivermectin, but when taken in totality, the evidence is at best very underwhelming, which is why these major organizations um, have argued against the use of ivermectin, and the manufacturer of ivermectin has said, do not use our drug for treating COVID, which is really interesting because if there's a conspiracy theme in healthcare, it's anti drug manufacturer. And here, the drug manufacturer itself um, is because of conflict of interest for pumping their drugs and making profits. Here, they're saying, don't buy our drug, don't give us more profit because we don't believe it works. But that in no way has curtailed some of the enthusiasm for the use of ivermectin. It's really a complicated mess, but suffice it
Hey,
to
John,
say, yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, in your opinion, how is this different from or similar to the whole hydroxychloroquine debacle or, enthusiasm that was out there early on in the pandemic? Is this a different drug totally, or is it pretty similar? And
No,
has
it's
hydroxychloroquine
totally
finally
different.
been
Yeah,
debunked or not?
yeah. So the similarities are if you look in vitro studies, ivermectin does have activity against the virus, as does hydroxychloroquine. But as every drug company will tell you, they spend billions of dollars chasing things that look promising in vitro or look promising in mice or look promising in primates that just don't work in humans or too toxic in humans. So the early in vitro studies of both hydroxychloroquine. That's how hydroxychloroquine became one of the earliest candidates, is because in vitro it was incredibly effective against the MERS and the original SARS, but it just doesn't translate into human biology. And similarly, ivermectin has some in vitro activity, although at much higher levels than what you can achieve with oral ivermectin in vitro. So there are problems. So the in vitro evidence for ivermectin is less than the in vitro evidence was for hydroxychloroquine. The other similarity is that we're all desperate, seeking a cure. And so we want to believe, we have a bias towards wanting to believe, it's just human nature, that these two drugs or any other drug is going to work. There have been so many promising candidates in vitro that haven't made it um, to proof in human studies. So those are some of the similarities, and then the whole conspiracy world we live in, where there's such deep distrust of the scientific community, deep distrust of institutions and federal agencies, and there've been, frankly, a number of stumbles in recommendations early on because we're learning daily more and more about what this virus is about, what drugs work and don't work. So those stumbles are taken as evidence that you can't trust the institutions that are saying don't use it. And the science behind it in vitro suggests that it might have some benefit. And there are individual small studies of both. The way that hydroxychloroquine took off, there's one study in France that was an observational retrospective study that was that fueled this desire to have something quick that worked, that sent waves of enthusiasm around the world. But that study was retracted by the journal that originally published it because the methodology was so horrible. That didn't stop the authors of that study in France from saying it's malpractice not to use hydroxychloroquine. So the ability to really establish rigorous science from the lab into human studies is a long, arduous journey, and rushing it leads to some of these kinds of false conclusions.
So,
Hey,
John,
yeah, go ahead, Fiona.
if I may, thank you, Jason. So I have family connections in Texas who are ivermectin supporters. In fact, have been just taking ivermectin unvaccinated and then going into restaurants without a mask, etc. What source would you recommend for people like that very plainly and accurately paints the picture that in totality ivermectin is just not effective?
So I will find it and I'll have it tweeted out on
Sure.
TNATW. But there was one within the last 6 weeks that was a meta-analysis that looked at methodology and outcomes, and it concluded there was no evidence. So I'll have to find that. Danish, I don't know if you remember where that is offhand, but I think it might have been New England Journal of Medicine, but I'll find it and I'll tweet it out.
That's
Okay.
perfect.
Awesome, thank you.
John, so here's this is one of the things that I've experienced in most of the rooms. One of the biggest questions that commonly gets asked is, why was ivermectin chosen? And then separately, why was hydroxychloroquine looked at? Why were these two medications looked at as a possible solution? And the backstory of both of them
Yeah.
is a
So
little different. So I think that's what's missing from the understanding of why was it even chosen? Like, what was the purpose?
Yeah, so and there have been thousands of drugs tested in vitro, repurposing old drugs against the virus in vitro. So lots of candidate drugs have been tried, but the origins of the hydroxychloroquine fervor was based upon in vitro studies done back in the days of MERS that showed it had pretty significant activity in a test tube and a petri dish. And so that was the basis of trying it. There was a trial there wasn't a trial. It was a retrospective analysis in a hospital in France that looked back at people who got hydroxychloroquine versus those who didn't, and they claimed that they had better outcomes in those who got it than those who didn't. But if you look at how the patients were uh, not randomized to treatment, there were systematic biases in which patients ended up in which treatment or placebo group. There wasn't even a placebo, treatment or not. And it was a classic, poorly conducted observational retrospective look at data that had all kinds of pre-selection bias in how patients were assigned to get the drug or not, to render it completely meaningless. And then there were tons of studies done thereafter that showed no benefit whatsoever. The one study I was really interested that was never completed was approved and launched at UC San Diego to do immediate post-exposure prophylaxis. Um, and both the CDC and NIH came out and said that this drug has no benefit whatsoever under any circumstances. So they couldn't recruit any patients. That study was never done. There was another study done, multi-institutional study, that looked at post-exposure prophylaxis, but on average, they started the post-exposure prophylactic use of hydroxychloroquine 3 or 4 days after the exposure. So there is some small chance that if that study had been done, they might have seen a small benefit of giving it immediately after exposure. But every other study done showed no benefit whatsoever in humans in actual, controlled trials. In contrast, so that's kind of the origin of hydroxychloroquine as a candidate. The origins of ivermectin as a candidate, I don't know exactly how it started, but I know early in the pandemic, it was being used routinely in parts of Latin America, notably Brazil, and there were claims based, just like the hydroxychloroquine claims from some infamous doctors in the US that, I've given it to 100 patients and none of them ended up in the hospital. Well, on average, out of 100 patients who get infected with COVID, none of them go to the hospital. So that didn't prove anything, but those same kind of reports were coming out of Brazil. I have 1,000 patients on it and no one went to the hospital. Those kind of anecdotal stories in a world where we all desperately want to see something that works, gives us some encouragement, some inspiration. We're worried about our loved ones dying, and someone says, in my hands this drug works, and so we're going to try it. And it became sort of standard therapy throughout parts of Latin America. And then it got subjected to more rigorous clinical trials, and none of the rigorous clinical trials um, have really stood the test of time in the context of all the other studies. But whether someone started off in vitro or not with ivermectin, I have not seen evidence of that. But I know that there were lots of anecdotal reports that originated in Latin America that started the fervor over ivermectin.
Okay, let's go into more interesting headlines that are coming out. Here's one from Faraz that Waymo, we read the headline in the past 48 hours that Google's autonomous car company Waymo is now on the roads of San Francisco. They started out in Flagstaff, Arizona, or what was the other city in Arizona?
Chandler, Arizona.
Chandler, Arizona. Thank you.
The difference between Chandler, Arizona and San Francisco is major.
Yeah.
Because Chandler is a grid.
Yep.
And it's very easy to operate within a grid, which is why they started testing there.
And I imagine it's incredibly flat as well and not much rain.
That too. that too.
Yeah,
Exactly. All of
autonomous cars don't like rain, and they don't like hills, and they like grids. So it was an obvious.
Well, they've been testing cars from the American auto industry in the deserts in Arizona for 50 years.
So the point is an important one, because now that Waymo is on the roads of San Francisco's a bit chaotic to navigate from a car perspective. Not on a global scale, but on an American scale, it's a bit chaotic. Ho Chi Minh City and some towns in India would laugh at the lack of chaos on San Francisco roads, but for Americans, it's challenging. So Waymo on the roads of San Francisco is a whole new level, a new challenge for autonomous vehicles. And the headline now, we read that now Waymo's on the roads to San Francisco, but the headline today is Waymo is opening its driver-supported robotaxis in San Francisco to selected riders, and now they're making them free. Waymo starts offering free rides in its autonomous cars in San Francisco, maybe because people are afraid for their lives to ride in an autonomous vehicle on the roads of San Francisco. And maybe if they're free, people would participate. I joke, but I don't know why they're doing them for free. I think people would be happy to pay for them.
There's a support driver as well, Tyler. There's a backup driver present as well.
Yes, there's a physical person present just in case, because there's a lot of companies who would love to delay. There's a lot of people, unions, who would love to see these things not happen. Autonomous taxis.
I just DM you a related article just
Okay.
on that point.
And to highlight that point, you only need to look at the massive protests against Uber when they went into London and Paris and many other cities. Some of them got incredibly violent, and cars were destroyed. The taxi drivers started destroying and flipping over Uber cars because they didn't want Ubers to come to their cities. And yet many of those Ubers are there, and it's had a negative impact on the drivers. And now autonomous Ubers essentially would really be a thorn in the paw of taxi drivers. If you think Ubers with humans were a threat to taxis, what about cars driving themselves without taxi drivers at all? That obviously that's an even much bigger threat. So you can imagine that you could see similar situations. So if there was a car without a driver, without a human driver, you could see how they would jump in front of the car and pray to God they got hit. Because after all, this is Google, and Google has more than $10,000 in their bank account to pay for somebody being hit by an autonomous car. Matter of fact, you can imagine the homeless people of San Francisco looking at this as winning the lottery, jumping in front of one of these Waymo autonomous cars. So now you know why there's actually a human there, just in case, because the idea of getting hit by Google, as a homeless person on the streets of San Francisco. Yes, please, pretty please. Google, could you please hit me with your car? Pretty please. How many million can I get again? How fast will journalists be ready to write the story that an autonomous car hit a homeless person in San Francisco? Oh, it'll take about 10 seconds for that story to go viral. Yes, please. Sign me up. There's no shortage of people who will literally be throwing themselves in front of these cars when they realize they're autonomous cars, as soon as you remove the human from those cars. So there's no choice to not have a human in those cars.
Tyler, to add to that, the city there in San Francisco has a massive budget or outlay when their cable cars and buses and all of those for accidents they get into. So the city is going to be very in favor of, as you note, people, they're going to be favorable to people and not to Google on that one. So
okay,
I see that happening.
The next article is from Cheryl from Reuters. The headline reads, Toyota halts its all self-driving vehicles after Olympic Village accident. And Toyota was using these autonomous shuttles. I think they're electric as well. Yes, they were. These electronic
EV
shuttles in Tokyo for the Olympic Village. And now there's been an accident. In a YouTube video, Toyota chief executive apologized for the incident and said he offered to meet the person but was unable to do so. A vehicle is stronger than a person, so I was obviously worried about how they were, he said, answering questions about the incident. Toyota said the accident showed the difficulty of the self-driving vehicle to operate in the special circumstances of the village during the Paralympics with people who are visually impaired or have other disabilities. Oh, Jesus. They hit a blind person?
Yeah, but he was all right. He could go home after some observation.
It shows that autonomous vehicles are not yet realistic for normal roads. Ouch.
No, this is Toyota. So
yeah, in Japan.
Yes, meaning what? Because they are probably one of those that don't want EV to be rolled out so fast, right?
Yeah, maybe so. The vehicle had stopped at a T junction and was about to turn under manual control of the operator, who was using the vehicle's joystick control when the vehicle hit the athlete going at around 1 or 2 kilometers an hour. Toyota said. He said Paralympic officials had told him that the athlete, who remained conscious, was taken to the athlete village medical center for treatment and was able to walk back to their residence. Now, what's interesting and sadly I a bit ironic in all of this is they were using these during the Olympic Games, the International Olympic Games, which just concluded, and now they're having the Paralympic Games also in Tokyo. And so these are Olympians who are, can we say physically challenged? Is that socially appropriate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
yes.
and so many of them are blind or deaf or have other disabilities of some kind to even be able to participate as an athlete in these games. But these vehicles were being used in the Olympic Village for the irregular games, and now they're still being used in the Olympic Village with the Paralympic athletes, and hence there was an accident. So yeah, indeed, very challenging, and I'm surprised. It's very unfortunate. So thank you for that, Cheryl. The next one is from Katerina. That a discovery of fastest ever magnet wave propagation, and that might not sound important. However, like light waves, magnet waves move through materials at a fixed maximum velocity. However, at the smallest possible length scale, nanometers, and the shortest possible time scale, femtoseconds, magnetism behaves differently. Physicists at Radboud University have discovered that magnetic waves with very short wavelengths can propagate up to 40% faster than previously thought. This supermagnetic propagation offers opportunities for even faster, smaller, and more energy-efficient ways of data processing in future computers. The research will be published in Physical Review on August 25th. Fantastic. Faster computers, everybody. Here it comes. So
I'm in the middle of a conference call and I heard you say this and I had to turn it up and stop listening. Sorry.
Yeah. We covered Waymo. And then Faraz sends in this one about a bad solar storm could cause an internet apocalypse. The undersea cables that connect much of the world would be hit especially hard by coronal mass ejection, aka a solar flare. At the SIGCOMM 2021 Data Communication Conference on Thursday, Sanjita Abdu of the University of California, Irvine presented Solar Superstorms, Planning for the Internet Apocalypse, an examination of the damage a fast-moving cloud of magnetized solar particles could cause the global internet. Abdu points out an additional nuance to the blackout-causing solar storm, the scenario where even if the power returns in hours or days, mass internet outages persist. There's some good news up front. Abu found that local and regional internet infrastructures would be at low risk of damage even if massive solar flare storm, because optical fiber itself isn't affected by geometrically induced currents. Short cable spans are also grounded very regularly, but for long undersea cables that connect continents, the risks are much higher. A solar storm that disrupted a number of these cables around the world could cause a massive loss of connectivity by cutting countries off at the source, even while leaving local infrastructure intact. It would be like cutting the flow of an apartment building because of a water main break. What really got me thinking about this is that with the pandemic, we saw how unprepared the world was. There was no protocol to deal with it effectively. And it's the same with the internet resilience, Abdu told Wired ahead of her talk. Our infrastructure is not prepared for a large-scale solar event. We have very limited understanding of what the extent of the damage would be. The information gap mostly comes from lack of data. Severe solar storms are rare and are only three main examples to go off in recent history. Large events in 1859 and 1921 demonstrated that geomagnetic disturbances can disrupt electrical infrastructure and communication lines like telegraph wires. During the massive 1859 Carrington event, compass needles swung wildly and unpredictably, and the aurora borealis was visible at the equator. Holy shit. But those geometric disturbances occurred before modern electric grids were established, and moderate severely solar storms in 1989 knocked out Hydro-Quebec's grid and caused the 9-hour blackout in northern Canada, but that too occurred before the rise of modern internet infrastructure. Though they don't happen often, coronal mass ejections are a real threat to internet resilience. And after 3 decades of low storm activity, she and other researchers point out that the probability of another incident is rising. There you go.
As you can see, I'm reading a lot.
Yeah. The next one is from Katerina from the Moscow Times, and the headline reads, Russia's drive to replace foreign technology is slowly working. Using primitive methods, the Kremlin has made steady progress towards a goal that once seemed impossible, weaning Russia off foreign-made technologies. The relentless offensive against global online platforms doesn't show any signs of slowing down. That poses a question. Is Russia prepared to get rid of global platforms by the end of the year? Such a development now seems highly likely, given the scale of Russia's important substitution effort in technology, a campaign that is much more important than learning how to produce Russian Parmesan in Moscow suburbs. Only 3 years ago, it looked like a very distant and frankly hardly achievable objective. At a tech conference in August 2019, the chief software engineer at one of the biggest Russian information security companies joked that they didn't want to miss the fun of the panel on software import substitution. To them, the idea was a little more than a not so clever joke. That they put a Russian stamp on the box doesn't mean that what's inside is actually being made in the country. Nowadays, he doesn't joke as often. Russia is now one of the very few countries in which local platforms are successfully competing with American online services. For years, Russia had also boasted the most advanced online banking system in Europe, more advanced even than in Japan. In short, the tech industry has been the fastest growing sector in the Russian economy, the result of having the largest engineering community in the world, inherited from the Soviet Union, along with very good nationwide technical education system. But until recently, a host of existential problems had persisted. Russia's national internet infrastructure was built on U.S. technologies, mostly Cisco. That was a conscious decision made in the mid-1990s when local industry couldn't provide the modern technology as it lagged the West by 20 to 25 years. Instead, in the span of 3 years, over 70% of all Russian inner-city phone stations were replaced by modern digital ones made in the West. Ever since, the Russian internet has been passed through and directed by American-made tech. The country was also way behind the West in manufacturing hardware, especially microchips. Russia's social media platforms have long been the most popular in the country, but WhatsApp has made a dramatic breakthrough thanks to the groups feature, something Russian school teachers and apartment buildings communities fell in love with, while most Russians watched YouTube, and Microsoft Office was omnipresent in offices all over the country. That was the state of play 6 years ago when the import substitution was proclaimed one of Kremlin's most major policy goals. Since then, Russia and its tech industry have come very far. Communications watchdog of Russia has been busy supplying the national interest infrastructure with hardware to underpin the so-called Soviet sovereign internet. Russian-made and paid by the government. Meanwhile, the trade minister is twisting the arms of the software developers with Russian offices to adapt their products to Russian-made processors. The government's target is to have 70% of its technology purchases based on domestic-built processors by 2023. To help hit the goal, State Development Corporation was made to take over a chip plant to restart its manufacturing facilities. And the story goes on and on. The methods the Kremlin's employing to force Russians to adopt Russian-made technology might be primitive, but they are effective, and the government is making steady progress in dragging people into a domestic digital bubble with very visible borders. The Kremlin has ensured that YouTube is facing new competition from Russian platforms because YouTube doesn't comply with their takedown notices. And yeah, so there you go. The next article, so Russia's replacing the American stuff. Hardly a surprise. And then the next one is from Evan about another Chinese actress in deep shit. And this from France 24. It says top Chinese actress Zheng Shuang was hit with a $46 million tax evasion fine Friday, while references to film star Zhao Wei were wiped from video streaming sites as Beijing steps up its campaign against celebrity culture. Beijing is on a mission to rein in what it calls chaotic fan culture and celebrity excess after a spate of scandals in recent months that have taken down China's biggest entertainers, including singer Chris Wu, who was arrested on suspicion of rape earlier this month. Shanghai tax authorities on Friday filed Zheng a $46.1 million fine for tax evasion. Wow. Holy shit. How much does this actress make? And undeclared income between 2019 and 2020. So that's just for 1 year of income tax evasion? Holy shit. Well,
all of these actresses and actors have yin yang agreements as well, right? So they're all being pulled in too. And she's literally been scrubbed from everything.
Yeah, while filming,
I'm sure you know what a yin yang is.
Yeah, while filming a TV series, according to an online statement, Zheng, 30 years old, became a household name in China after starring in the hit 2009 remake of a Taiwanese drama called Meteor Shower, and a string of successful series and movies afterwards. China's state broadcasting regulator also pulled Zheng's offending TV drama and ordered producers not to hire her for future shows. Holy shit. The State Administration of Radio, Film, and Television added it had a zero tolerance for tax evasion, sky-high pay, and yin-yang contracts, referring to the shady contracts commonly used in Chinese showbiz to obscure actors' real pay. The state media has gone into overdrive, urging changes to China's entertainment culture for some time now. Artists' moral failures and legal violations, the cultivation of younger idols as chaotic fandoms have attracted widespread attention in society, state broadcaster said Tuesday. We must restore a clean and upright literacy and artistic environment to the public. No twerking. Upright literacy and artistic environment.
Tyler, this is, when I think the DD part really informs a lot. It's almost like a parent discovering a kid's diary, right? And like, you've been going where? You've been doing what? And I think what they're seeing is that their government officials have been going where, doing what, hanging with who? And I think that's what they saw, to be honest. Now it's all starting to make sense why this crackdown is happening. It's like, I think they're realizing corruption exists in the CCP for some reason. Like they woke up and they realized it.
China's cyber regulator released new regulations Friday that ban celebrity ranking lists and tighten control over chaotic celebrity fan clubs and management agencies. Video streaming sites said it halted an idol talent programs Thursday, while Chinese boy band made up of primary school children disbanded earlier this week after performers' ages sparked a public backlash. No more shit content for you, dear Chinese citizens. No more shit content for you. No more crap content on TikTok for you. No more twerking. No more dumbass videos. No more
proper Mandarin, wear properly, upright.
So in China, essentially the Kardashians would be illegal in China. And Kid Rock.
That wouldn't be such a bad thing.
This CCP might be onto something for a second. Hang on a second.
We're sure waiting for that milk.
So
you'll see the effect in 15, 20 years time.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, they're playing the long game here. No crap content for the next 15 years, and let's see who's further ahead and who's further behind. So the next one is from CNN. A blob of hot ocean is causing a mega drought thousands of miles away in the southwest Pacific Ocean, which is below Hawaii, basically. There is a huge region of unusually warm water covering an area about the size of Australia known as the Southern Blob. Bet you didn't know that. In the several thousand miles away, the South American nation of Chile has been experiencing a mega drought for more than a decade. Well, guess what? It's not going to stop for the next century. So you might as well move out now, my dear friends of Chile. With dwindling rain and water supplies. On the surface, these two events have nothing to do with each other, but a new study found they are linked by invisible forces of global atmospheric pressure and circulation. The Southern Blob, located east of Australia and New Zealand, emerged about 4 decades ago, likely caused by a naturally occurring decline in rainfall over the central tropic Pacific. But over time, climate change has made the blob bigger and hotter, and according to the study, a drop in rainfall affected atmospheric circulation in the region, creating wind patterns that change how warm and cold currents flow in the ocean, guiding more warm water to the blob while pushing cold water deeper down. The warm surface water that makes up the blob then heats the air above it, and as the atmosphere warms, it expands into a big, broad area of high pressure known as a pressure ridge, says Kyle Clem, co-author of the study and lecturer in climate science at the Victoria University of Wellington. It's the heat blob. That's why you're not going to have water and you're going to have to move your fucking house. So, the study published Thursday in the Journal of Climate marks the first time researchers have made a direct connection between the blob and the megadrought. This is Chile's longest drought on meteorological record, according to NASA. The last megadrought on this scale probably took place in the region more than 1,000 years ago.
That's the Atacama Desert, right? Basically, it's right next to the ocean, but it hasn't rained for like 200 years.
So, thank you for this one, just tweeting that out. And there was a related one. Give me 1 minute to find it. Where did it go? Where did it go? We're almost there. We'll get to it later, I guess. Okay, so the next one is, we covered the actress in China. Thank you, Evan. New Zealand-based Imgur, which is an image platform for sharing images, thinks camera-based AI is the future of shopping trolleys. New Zealand, when it comes to contactless automated supermarket shopping, Imgur is backing a vision-based approach. But unlike Amazon Go stores, you can read all about it. Indeed, we already know this, of what the future shopping is going to look like. But thank you to Joe Williams for that article from TechCrunch about how Imgur is getting into the future of shopping carts. And then the next one is scientists get photons to interact with a pair of atoms for the first time. Physicists at the EPFL have found a way to get photons to interact with a pair of atoms for the first time. The breakthrough is important for quantum computing, essentially. The breakthrough is important for the field of cavity quantum electrodynamics, a cutting-edge field leading the way to quantum technologies. There's no doubt we are moving steadily towards an era of technologies based on quantum physics, but to get there, we first have to master the ability to make light interact with matter, or more technically, photons with atoms. So thank you to Katerina for that one. And then Joe sends in this one. The most popular posts on Facebook are plagiarized. The way to succeed is by copying someone else's ideas. The conventional wisdom around the widely viewed content report that Facebook released last week is that it obscured more than it revealed. The company's effort to demonstrate that most users do not regularly see divisive news stories in their feeds received widespread criticism for offering only a highest level view of the data possible. The most shared domain on Facebook is youtube.com. But in recent days, I've spent more time looking at the data that Facebook actually did share. And while it's true that it tells us a little about the hot button issues like the spread of COVID-19 misinformation or the rise of vaccine hesitancy, the report arguably reveals something just as damning. Almost all of the most viewed content on Facebook over the past quarter were effectively plagiarized from elsewhere. And some of the same audience building tactics that allowed Russian interference to flourish on the platform in the 2019 2016 election continue to be effective. Today, I want to look at two aspects of the data. First, we'll look at the most viewed posts on Facebook over the past quarter to see where they originated from. Second, we'll look at one of the most popular links on the platform, which may be running a grift on U.S. military veterans. So that's from The Verge. I just tweeted that out. Thank you, Joe. And then there's now a rare possible look at an Einstein ring spotted by the Hubble Space Telescope that I just tweeted out. NASA's Hubble telescope captured a cluster of distant galaxies surrounded in a reflective light, an illusion first predicted by Einstein over a century ago, called an Einstein ring. And now you can see a close-up image of it. It's truly mind-blowing. But it's an illusion. And they take this image, for example. Oh, it's a really fun click-through story that you can do that I just tweeted out. Thank you to Katarina for that one. And the next one, the secrets of COVID-19 transmission revealed in a turbulent puffs. The turbulence is everywhere. In the moment of the wind, the ocean waves, and even magnetic fields of space. It can also be seen in a more transient phenomena and how COVID spreads. And China's stock regulators plan to propose new rules that could thwart Chinese internet companies' plans to list in the U.S. That was one of the biggest stories of the day from the Wall Street Journal. And Peloton slashes prices on exercise bikes, predicts slowing growth. The lowest cost Peloton bike will sell for $1,500, down from $1,900. The higher priced Bike Plus still goes for $2,500. So get those now for Christmas. HP and Dell are seeing demand for computers outpacing their ability to satisfy customer demand as everyone's starting to work from home. And the next one's from the Wall Street Journal. It says T-Mobile hacker who stole data on 50 million customers is now doing this interview with the Wall Street Journal, which you can now read, where he says T-Mobile security is Swiss cheese. Maybe they use Microsoft. So the next one's from Tomoko in Japan. It says Reddit takes a teach the controversy approach to pandemic and vaccines. Reddit resists banning pandemic misinformation, allows vaccine dissent. And maybe because they have Chinese investors is what a lot of people on Reddit are starting to ask, actually. That China is intentionally trying to spread vaccine misinformation. We know for a fact that Russia did. The FBI director even says so publicly. They tracked back the vaccine misinformation campaigns to the Kremlin. So could China be using its investments in tech companies to spread misinformation, which, by the way, they accuse America of doing, and Russia does as well? So is this what's going on? Is this why Reddit isn't able to take down vaccine misinformation like all the other platforms are able to do?
But there's an article in South China Morning Post that says that Sinovac is not as good as AstraZeneca.
Yeah, South China Morning Post is remarkably critical of China. I'm surprised they're still in business.
Did you cover the other China news today that they are probably to ban exclusive brands like Cookie and the other ones from selling expensive things in China? So these super malls in Hong Kong and in Shanghai might be
Johan,
you undone.
Are you on your earbuds? Because you sound ridiculous when you use the earbuds.
Yeah, Tyler, you do know who owns that Post newspaper in Hong Kong, don't you?
Alibaba.
Exactly, Jack Ma.
Jack Ma, yeah. And you do know that the state is trying to force them to sell it to a Beijing-friendly buyer. That's publicly reported.
Yes.
By the way, just know that Zhao Wei, she's also an early investor of Alibaba.
Oh, interesting. The actress who just got blacklisted?
Yep.
Oh, ouch. So China spells out how excessive 996 work culture is illegal. We covered that. Thank you, Poppy. And Founders Fund backs Royal, a music marketplace planning to sell song rights as NFTs. Truly brilliant. And we had this headline when we met here 10 hours ago, and I brought in my dear friend Ash Pranori, who's 50% of Avicii and is a real tech whiz himself and a real music veteran with as well. And Avicii is one of the few artists who were intelligent enough to keep their own rights and not sell them to a record label. And that's why they made so much fucking money from Spotify, because Spotify pays the rights holders, which Avicii was their own rights holders. So just to highlight how Ash was a true brilliant component of Avicii. And we had a really fascinating conversation about this Blau, who's launching this company called Royal, which is a clever name because it implies royalties, which is how people get paid for their rights in music. It's through royalties. And so the company's called Royal.io. And now, using the power of NFTs, fans or anyone can buy fractional ownership of songs and receive the royalties payments that are a song, when it's published somewhere, earns money, or when it's performed some way, that's performance rights, there's still money paid. So there are associations and agencies who collect the fees on behalf of the artists. That's ASCAP and BMI and others. So when your song is played in Starbucks, the songwriters get a payment, because Starbucks, ASCAP and BMI go to every venue who's playing music anywhere and informs them, do you realize you have to pay the fees? And they do. All big businesses do. So they have these agreements all in place everywhere for the most part, and on TV and everywhere music is played, generally, with the exception of your backyard barbecue. But in YouTube videos, you have to pay all the rights, basically. So now you can buy fractional ownership in a song, especially if you think the value of that song will go up, and you can sell your fractional ownership in that song if that song becomes wildly popular. So imagine you buy a fractional ownership in a song from some smallish artist that you believe is going to become next year's big hit song, and then it does. Oh boy, that's worth a lot of money. So it's a really interesting concept now that fans can participate in the ownerships of the songs. But it gets more interesting than that. Oh yes, it does get more interesting, because what happens then when an artist says, I'm going to write 10 new songs later this year, and you can buy ownership in them now? Unheard. There's nothing to listen to. How much would you pay now? And then generally an artist is going to want to get somewhere in the neighborhood of about, today, maybe $50,000 to $100,000 up front and maybe they want to sell half. They would want to keep half of each song for themselves, and half they would sell out. So if they get $100,000 for selling half of 10 songs, you can get an idea of how much you do the backward napkin math on that, and see if you would want to, how much of song you would want to acquire. And then they, release the songs, and they go out, and hopefully you get allocated as part of the hit song and not the shit song on the album. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, of course. But one thing is interesting is, will the streaming platforms, namely Spotify, partner with Royal in this case, or will Spotify duplicate it and do it their own self and allow artists to do fractional ownership sales on Spotify? I imagine the latter would be more likely, because Spotify is also going to allow, in the very near future, artists to sell merchandise, their t-shirts and hats and whatever, and hoodies, and concert tickets, physical concerts, but also digital concert tickets, and also digital merchandise, and also digital kind of unique access to backstage passes and all kinds of shit like that. And why not allow them to sell fractional ownership in their songs? Why not? But that, if you're going to allow them to sell all those other things, why not allow them to sell the fifth thing? That's why I think Spotify will do it on their own. So I did ask my dear friend Ash, who happens to be very best buddies with the CEO of Spotify, what do we think the streaming platforms are likely to do? And he said, well, I think I can't speak for all the streaming platforms, but the biggest one, I know that, that they would, so you have to go back and listen to the previous Tech News Around the World to hear what Ash says about the biggest streaming platform and what they would do. And just keep in mind, it's his very dear best friend who he's talking about. So he probably knows a lot more than any journalist ever could. It's a little glimpse as to the future of, there might be some gems in there you might want to fish out if you want to know how the music biz is going to look in the very near future. So the really interesting chat we had with my buddy Ash. So, but that whole new concept of NFTs, I think, is fantastic for fractional ownership of songs. I think it's a win-win for everybody. But least of all the labels. This is replacing the record labels. They're just totally fucked. I mean, it's as simple as that. And you are better off being an unsigned artist today than a signed artist today, given all of these changes that are underway right now. Because you still have all your rights as an unsigned artist. And you might be thinking, yeah, well, it sucks being an unsigned artist. Yes, but you still have all of your rights. So if you have any interest, if you have any kind of possibility of becoming an artist, then you can make a huge multiple more than a regular signed artist. Because signed artists today are not going to be able to participate in all this cool new tech, because they've signed contracts for 6 albums in advance. Most artists sign 6-album deals, and they might be in the middle of a 6-album deal. So that means they're stuck in that contract for the next 15 to 20 years. So they're fucked. But you as an unsigned artist are not stuck in that situation. You can benefit from this fractional ownership stuff and selling all your stuff on Spotify and all that. So it's fantastic for unsigned artists at the moment. So Mahogany sends in this one, that in a leaked email, the United Launch Alliance official calls NASA leadership incompetent. Let me know if there's anything else you need. We're here to serve. And so in what appears to be a legitimate emails from April and May, a senior official of a U.S. rocket company characterizes the leadership of NASA as incompetent and unpredictable. Ouch. Looks like ULA will not be doing much more business with NASA, who writes all the big checks. So you just fucked your company forever. Good, well done. So the next one's from the New York Times, that Politico is sold to Axel Springer out of Germany for more than $1 billion. The publishing giant will take control of Politico, Politico Europe, and Politico's tech news site Protocol, which is run by a buddy, Mark. So congrats to Politico. And Axel Springer continues to grow as one of the biggest media empires. And then the next one from Willie in the audience, from entrepreneur.com, about a robot called Xiolus. Users have ended up in therapy for falling in love with their AI. Xiolus is an advanced AI system designed as a chatbot to create emotional bonds with its users. And now those users are finding themselves in therapy for falling in love with their AI robots. I just tweeted that out. And then Mahogany sends in this one, that Apple Watch saves the life of an Arizona woman. I'm glad I reacted so quickly because it was life-threatening, Arizona resident says. And these stories happen all the time. But this is very interesting that this headline comes out today, because it's now rumored that the Apple Watch Series 7 will come out at the next Apple event in early September. So what a nice coincidence that this story is coming out now, just in time for the next Apple Watch announcement. And then Moeth in the audience sends in this one, that Saudi Arabia announces a $1.2 billion tech initiatives, unveils first locally made smart chip. And Saudi Arabia is trying to ramp up on the startup game. And Florian sends in this one, that the World Bank official proposes digital identity steps to drive inclusion. Conscious and steady efforts have been made to accelerate progress and build out digital identity systems, especially in the Western and Central African regions, says the World Bank. Oh, the World Bank wants to make sure that we're all digitally authenticated and identified. Okay. And NFTs supplant Rolexes and Lambos as the new digital savvy flex, says the Los Angeles Times. Bitcoin's bouncing at around 50,000. DeFi's seeking to go mainstream, but all anyone in the digital asset world wants to talk about are NFTs. And the headline, it's a long story, and they're trying to make the case that NFTs are the new status symbol. And the next article is New Zealand police break up a anti-lockdown protest in Auckland, New Zealand. But this is no ordinary anti-lockdown protest in New Zealand. New Zealand police break up the one-person anti-lockdown protest in Auckland. An Instagram account had called on people to get involved. A one-person anti-lockdown protest in central Auckland has been shut down after the police were alerted to discussions of a potential gathering on social media. New Zealand police said officers were on Queen Street on Friday after hearing a protest was being planned, but only one person arrived with the intention to protest, and they shut him down. They shut that dude down. Nice try, buddy. One army of one. Zoom dysphoria is following us into the real world. 18 months of using front-facing cameras has distorted our self-image, and a new study reveals that the effects aren't going away easily. And Nissan's electric microcar will come with a 20 kilowatt-hour battery and driver assists to debut in 2022. Developed in conjunction with Mitsubishi, Nissan's micro-electric vehicle is expected to have a 200-kilometer range and will feature vehicle-to-home charging. Fantastic. A cute little micro car like the Wuling in China, which sells for $4,000 for a person car. Good luck competing with that. So the next one is from the New York Times, from Poppy. Is there a nuclear option for stopping climate change? Once the kind of darling of environmentalists, nuclear power is now being hailed by some as a solution to a warming world. Is this really a story from the New York Times? Is there a nuclear option for stopping climate change? Well, Bill Gates would love there to be so. But that got shot to shit politically.
Chris Kornoff can speak on that.
Chris can absolutely speak on that. Is Chris around?
I just pinged him in. Let's
Thank
see
you.
if he'll join.
Let's see if he'll join. I'll save that tab open to see and let me know if he pops in. Apple loosens App Store payment rules in lawsuit settlement. That was one of the biggest stories of the day. The Afghan minister of, I forget which minister he was, but Reuters and others reporting that an Afghan minister is now a food delivery bicyclist in Germany. Syed Sadat used to be the communications minister in the Afghan government before moving to Germany last September, where he now is a real-time food delivery bicyclist. And now he's a delivery man in the eastern city of Leipzig. And you can see him working, doing a food delivery with his bike. He said some at home criticized him for taking such a job after having served in the government for 2 years, leaving office in 2018. But for him now, a job is a job. I have nothing to feel guilty about, the 49-year-old British-Afghan dual citizen said, standing in his orange uniform next to his bike. He had quit the Afghan government because of disagreements with members of the president's circle. He said, I hope other politicians also follow the same path, working with the public rather than just hiding. His story has gained particular prominence with the chaos unfolding at home after the Taliban takeover. Family and friends of his also want to leave, hoping joining the thousands of others on evacuation flights or trying to find other routes. With the withdrawal of U.S. troops on the horizon, the number of Afghan asylum seekers in Germany has risen since the beginning of the year, jumping by more than 130%. Data from the Federal Office of Migration and Refugees has showed. Even though his dual citizenship meant he could have chosen to move to Britain, where he had spent much of his life, he relocated to Germany at the end of 2020, seizing his last opportunity to do so before that path was closed by Britain's exit from the European Union. He chose Germany because he expected it to have a better economic future and a leading role in the telecom and IT sectors in the long term. But even with his background, Sadat has struggled to find a job in Germany that matched his experience with degrees in IT and telecommunications. Sadat has hoped to find work in a related field, but with no German, his chances were slim. The language is the most important part, he says. Every day he does 4 hours of German at a language school before starting a 6-hour evening shift delivering meals for a food delivery app where he started this summer. The first few days were exciting but difficult, he said, describing the challenge of learning to cycle in the city traffic. The more you go out and the more you see people, the more you learn, he said. End of article. Indeed, you do got to learn the local language in Germany. So the next one is Japanese startup iSpace unveils new moon lander with a target launch date in 2024. The next generation lunar lander, dubbed Series 2, will include multiple payload bays and advanced guidance, navigation, and controls. And researchers find Mars's snow. I didn't know there was snow on Mars. I guess there is. Mars's snow has dust mixed into it and could melt into water. Well, yeah, no shit, it can melt into water. That's what snow does, you idiot. So the team intends to dig deeper into ice exposures on Mars and learn more about the planet's climate history. The next one's from Mahogany, that the Great Resignation is here and no one is prepared. Around the world, workers are quitting their jobs in record numbers and bosses are still scrambling to figure out how to keep them. And in China, they're calling it the lying flat phenomena, and in the West, we're calling it the Great Resignation. And rather than write out the disappointment and stick with a new role, Ashley decided to join the Great Resignation, and the millions of others who have quit their jobs over the spring and summers. Lockdown provided an opportunity to reflect and help me realize that I want what I want from work. Ashley explains, I want a job that suits my life and means that I'm not tied to a desk all day, every day. And if I don't feel happy, I can quit. There are more than enough jobs out there. Hard data is backing up this anecdotal evidence. Workers are drafting up resignation emails, handing in their notices, and heading for the exit door in droves. The trend is worldwide. In the UK, job vacancies soared to an all-time high in July, with available posts surpassing 1 million for the first time. In the US, 4 million people quit their jobs in April, a 20-year high, followed by record 10 million jobs being available by the end of June. A Microsoft study has found that 41% of the global workforce is considering leaving their employer this year. Holy shit! 41% of people are thinking of quitting their jobs? Wow. As more of the economy reopens following COVID vaccinations and the end of social restrictions, demand for talent is fast outstripping supply. It's now an employee's market. In May, jobs site Reed had its highest number of monthly postings since 2008. In August, another 250,000 roles went live on the site. The surge in opportunities contrasts with the severe slowdown in the job market last year, with reports of openings receiving thousands of applications, says Simon Wingate, the company's managing director. According to his site, opportunities advertising remote work have grown more than fourfold compared to before the pandemic. It's not just hospitality, logistics and entertainment experiencing labor shortages. Seismic contractions through lockdown have been followed by economies and industries rebounding in a big way this year, some even stronger than before COVID. Intense growth coupled with flexibility of remote work means white-collar workers have more choice where they ply their trade than ever before.
Tyler.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an interesting phenomenon, and employers are going to be desperate to hire people. As a result, the power is in the employees' hands, and so they can choose to work remote, which means that the workforce will be scattered around the globe or country. Therefore, they will be hard to centralize back into offices again, unless at great cost. And of course, you might have read the stories that there's some white-collar workers that are doing 2 remote jobs at the same time, making double salary. Neither employer knows the truth.
Say that again, Jeremiah.
There's been some articles where people have 2 jobs secretly,
right?
2 full-time jobs, and they can outsource bits of it to gig workers.
Yeah.
So, that's amazing, right? You could be making 200, 300, 400, 500K a year from home.
Yep. And that's that now you know why laptop sales are booming. So the next one is the e-bike Go rugged G1 electric scooter priced from 85,000 rupees. Has a 160 kilometer range. So there's more and more. These electronic mopeds are literally now booming, like right now. Like in the past 2 weeks, there's now like 5 electric moped companies all blasting off simultaneously. So there's that, which is great. That means there'll be price competition and keep them down and higher adoption and, lovely. The Crimea River, Russia and Ukraine's water conflict. Russia and Ukraine have been at odds over lots of things in recent years, but the latest spat is over something particularly fluid and intractable, which is water. And it's because the source of water into Crimea comes from Ukraine, and Russia took over Crimea. And Ukraine said, oh, that's fine, you can have that land. We'll just stop the water from going there. Good luck. And that's what they did.
Crimea River.
And that's why the headline is called Crimea River.
I thought you were about to sing us Justin Timberlake's song then, Tyler.
While much of the attention on Ukraine's conflict with Russia tends to focus on Ukraine, where Russian-backed separatists control 2 Ukrainian provinces amid an ongoing civil war that's already killed 14,000 people, there's also Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014 and continues to govern directly. Since that time, Crimea has been running out of drinking water, and Moscow isn't happy about it. Crimea is a sea-girded peninsula of arid and salty marshes. For decades, the Soviet-era canal brought Crimea 85% of its fresh water from rivers on the Ukrainian mainland. But that began to change in 2014 after a popular uprising in Ukraine ousted the country's Kremlin-friendly president and Russia annexed Crimea, which is the only region of Ukraine where ethnic Russians predominate. Although neither Kiev, the US, or the EU recognize Russia's control over Crimea, Ukraine has no way of kicking out Russia's vastly superior forces. But at the same time, as long as the Kremlin's de facto government governs the place, Kiev believes it no longer has any responsibility for the well-being of the people who live there. After all, they are now under a Russian flag, not a Ukrainian one. And that's where the water crisis comes in. Damn it. Wow, this article is just full of puns. After the Russian takeover of Crimea, Ukraine built a dam across the Soviet-era canal to stop the flow of water to the peninsula. The political and practical logic was simple. Russia can't expect Ukraine to continue watering a garden that the Kremlin has stolen. The Ukrainian officials have made clear that they don't intend to change their minds about that. As a result, Crimean authorities have since 2014 been forced on occasion to ration water. And after a particularly harsh drought earlier this year, Moscow leveled the charge of genocide at Kiev for its decision to block the canal. Genocide. Oh, hilarious. This week, the Kremlin accused Kiev of ecocide as well. All of this has forced Russia to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in Crimean water infrastructure, not only for the drinking and irrigation needs of the region's 2.5 million civilian citizens, but also for the growing number of Russian naval personnel stationed there. Crimea River, you might say. But all that money adds up. According to Bloomberg's numbers, the more than $20 billion that Russia has spent on Crimea is roughly equal to 2 entire years of Russia's entire education budget. This is part of the bigger issue, the old you broke it, you bought it problem. Returning Crimea to Russian control in 2014 brought Putin an unprecedented windfall of political support at home, but now he's on the hook for it. Letting Crimeans go thirsty or live in the dark just isn't an option, but actually running a non-contiguous waterport peninsula costs a huge amount of money. With recent droughts and local mismanagement making the water problem worse, the Kremlin seems keen to open the taps, as it were, on this particular issue. What's next? Despite a Russian troop buildup in April, the Kremlin insists there will be no water war with Ukraine, but Crimea's water shortage isn't getting any better, and the global warming certainly won't help. Pour yourself a tall glass of water and watch the space. And the next one is the CEO of Epic Games sent out the tweet just to remind everybody that the lawsuit Apple settled today was the developer class action suit, not the Epic versus Apple suit, where he says we are fighting on. And
Bless you.
Thank you. Madagascar is on the brink of experiencing the world's first climate change famine, according to the UNO, which says Tens of thousands of people are already suffering catastrophic levels of hunger and food insecurity after 4 years without rain. Oh, another part of the world with many years of no rain? Oh, wow. How interesting. I wonder if it's going to rain soon. Yeah, right. Any day now, right? Like 100 fucking years from now. Get the fuck out of these places, folks. Do you just like COVID? Get a little education on the topic, get informed, learn the data, and get the fuck out, because the rain ain't coming back. It's going to get a lot worse. Iran is drying up, Madagascar, the west coast of South America, and just to name a few. Southern California, Southwestern California. Matter of fact, I have the map. Let me get it for you. Holy shit. Well, if this doesn't scare you straight and encourage you to move, I don't know what will. I actually have the map. Somebody sent it in. Poppy sent it in earlier today. I'm going to tweet it out right now. Here it comes. Droughtmonitor.unl.edu. Droughtmonitor. And then it's got the map, and it shows the whole southwest of America is very quickly becoming uninhabitable. There it is. Just send it out. Just click that little link and plan your next residence very carefully. I can assure you it won't be in California. Take a look at the map, or Oregon, or Nevada, or Utah. So the next one is from Poppy. Did Chris come in on the nuclear one yet? Not yet. A wake-up call. Madagascar teeters towards world's first climate change induced.
We got some nuclear. I hear nuclear.
Oh, there it is. There's that sexy voice.
It's like Beetlejuice, right? You say nuclear, and Chris materializes.
So, is there a nuclear? The New York Times headline says, August 26th, is there a nuclear option for stopping climate change? Humanity's future to avert the crisis of warming climate is sometimes framed as a grand technological problem. For centuries, countries relied on fossil fuels to industrialize their economies and generate wealth, and it was only in recent years that alternative ways of powering a society like solar and wind energy became viable. But when it comes to electricity, at least that story isn't true. Today, the United States gets 60% of its electricity from fossil fuels and just 20% from renewables. The final 20% comes from nuclear. A technology that has existed since the 1950s, produces no carbon dioxide, and has killed far fewer people than fossil fuels. Decarbonizing the electric grid is certainly not the only challenge climate change poses, but it is the central one, and the Biden administration has said the United States needs to meet it by 2035 should nuclear power be playing a bigger role in the transition.
But isn't there, hey, this is how, sorry I had stepped out. Isn't there an issue with disposing of the waste from those nuclear plants?
You can take all of it, put it in something the size of a football field, bury the football field, and then never speak of it again. Or you could use it to basically do something with TerraPower, where you can use it as actual energy generation, so there is no nuclear waste, and that waste becomes actually a resource to power more nuclear power, and then you just don't have it anymore. Instead,
That
with the
sounds a
carbon,
lot better than burying it. I
yeah, it
think
sounds a
I've
lot
read
better.
several things where there's leaks and it destroys the environment, not the vegetation, not to mention the side effects that people have experienced from being by those things. So yeah, the second option sounds better.
So do you know what our forward-thinking Department of Energy, groups that really looking to the future with things? They said, "Wow, this technology looks amazing. You're backed by Bill Gates and everything." They said, "Yeah, but we don't want to do that here. How about you go talk to the Russians that are Chinese and let us know essentially if they can work it out for us." So they went around about, and then after they basically said, "Okay, China's interested," then essentially Trump cut off the uranium exports because, of course, we're not getting along with China these days. And then, well, it left that just dead in the water. Their nuclear technology, just a quick, I will take 60 seconds because I want to dominate the room with things with stuff on this one because I'm so passionate about nuclear stuff. Just a 60-second version. The Department of Energy wasn't originally called the Department of Energy. It was originally the Atomic Energy Commission. Because the idea is, why would you use any other form of energy? We've learned how to split the atom. We have near infinite, basically, resources we can work with. It's that powerful. The thing is that when they realized how much energy can be used with this, Eisenhower said, let's give it to the rest of the world. And they had this whole thing called Atoms for Peace diplomacy. Put it everywhere. It's awesome. So here's the thing, essentially, where it went wrong. Turns out geopolitics are a little more complicated than that. And Russia detonates their version of the bomb. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh shit, we need to basically pivot everything. We're going to decommission our entire military. We're going to basically shut it all down, leave a few nukes behind, and then that's NATO for you. And they went, oh wait, we need to remilitarize everything. We need to basically enter into a Cold War JFK style thing. And when that happened, well, what happens about that near infinite energy that we figured out with the nuclear? Oh, we need to suddenly go from everyone has this and it's easy to do and it's so easy to do and humanity has a new era to, by the way, guys, actually this is really, really hard to do. And oh yeah, you can't weaponize this, even though it only takes you like a month to weaponize. It's like, yeah, don't actually look too deep into that. And let's basically artificially cripple that technology with like a sledgehammer. And it's not that it's technically that hard to do. Most of the things that we do for making nuclear difficult are artificial decisions made for geopolitical reasons. They have nothing to do with the underlying economics, technology, or logistics. We have crippled the technology artificially to make it more politically acceptable. Now, here's where that gets interesting. Politics changes over time, and when we're trying to solve climate change, they're saying, what about them nuclears? We could do that. 80% of essentially the Department of Energy's budget historically has been around nuclear technology because they're also responsible for the nuclear weapons. The thing is that if we shifted those resources to actually doing actual nuclear tech, not the politically friendly version that we've basically that's been crippled, but actual nuclear technology, we could easily transition the entire civilization over. The thing is that we have spent so many decades without real nuclear tech, but this kind of fake version of it that's been crippled so much, we would have to do a crash course on relearning some of those lessons of Los Alamos. So yes, that is my short little 60, actually I think it was 2-minute version with things, but yeah, that's nuclear for you.
So I have a question. Why some places are like, is Germany, according to this article, Germany's kind of taking off some of their nuclear plants. And why isn't, I mean, I can understand from a U.S. perspective why we don't do it. Why isn't it being done elsewhere?
So this is where it gets really interesting. You start going to the very bedrock foundation. We talk about globalization being this inevitable force. It's not. It's something that basically required a lot of military blood and coin to basically establish the underlying political infrastructure, which we built a financial infrastructure built on, which we built a whole NATO defensive alliance on. The thing is, when you talk about nuclear technology, specifically the ones that can be weaponized, you are touching near the foundations of the post-World War II era and the order essentially that basically we built the Western government like model off of. The thing about it is when you touch with this, you're playing with fire because when you make any changes to that underlying formula, you are changing essentially the idea of the Western alliance and Western culture as how we've built it out. So it's one of these, you can change almost any other part of Western civilization. That one is more touchy than the others. So that's why it's basically more politically sensitive.
Okay. So the next article is
I love nuclear.
Yeah.
By the way, we're just throwing this out there just as a shameless self-promotion plug. Sure. If anyone wants to have fun about more nuclear tech with things, we have a nuclear weapons club that I host here in Clubhouse, which is a lot of fun. Join if essentially you'd like to be on a list.
I hope that's not the name of it because I don't want to get on a list.
It is literally the Nuclear Weapons Club. We have a bunch of spooks and spies on there with things. It's great. I've got members of CIA basically follow me on here in Clubhouse. It's so much fun.
So the next one.
That sounds hilarious.
Oh, by the way, Johan, would you mind sharing what you shared with me about the flights out of Afghanistan?
Yeah. The thing is that we have a Swedish transport airplane, Hercules. It's called the Boeing 130 something, I think, that has been flying back and forth in between Turkey and Kabul. And they are getting so many SAM site surface-to-air missile locks on the airplane when flying over Afghanistan that they have been forced to more or less shut off the radar alert. And this by getting a radar lock is that you are being tracked. Somebody is tracking you with your targeting computer, and the only thing that differs in between falling screaming to the planet is somebody not pushing a button. And this is might be something that happens. What is the last of August? We all should be out of there.
So
you undone.
Johan, has a very intimate acquaintance on board this transporter that's going between Kabul airport and evacuating out refugees to Turkey. And during I'm just reiterating what he said in more clear English. So during the flights, the carrier is being tracked by surface-to-air missile locks, SAMs. So that it's being tracked.
It's the SAM. Yeah, the SAM site. It's not an actual missile fired at them, but this is the step. This is the
it's only one
impolite
step away.
before.
Correct.
Yeah, before firing it.
Correct. So and the plane knows that it has a surface-to-air missile tracker aimed at it. And so the plane has a warning detection alarm saying, beep, 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 like in Top Gun when the Russians, lock on to Tom Cruise's plane and it goes beep, 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 beep. And they either have to somehow unshake the missile lock, which is very difficult to do. And especially if you're in a huge craft like that. So it's so annoying and so repetitious that they've turned off the alarms on the planes.
They are still monitoring it, but they have not the signal on it anymore. And they are all everybody's looking out through the windows to see if something is coming. So yeah, this is a very, very short fuse before something goes very, very bad in that country.
Yeah, so it's not that fact has not been reached any media ears yet. So thank you for sharing that, Johan. So the next one's from Poppy, that drought conditions push people to leave home. The latest video news investigates reports. World Bank researchers found that people are 5 times as likely to move following drought conditions as they are after floods or periods of excess water. Yeah, having no water is 5 times more likely to force you to move than having too much. Yes, that's true. So thank you.
Well, for Tyler, for whatever reason, there's flood insurance, and I don't think there's drought insurance.
Mm-hmm. And
Tyler,
yes,
I think
my
friends are leaving Tahoe right now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, from
Tahoe.
You mean moving?
Yeah. So Lake Tahoe. Yeah, they're moving, or they left, or they're trying to sell their home. Good luck trying to sell your home. You can't even see it. For those that don't know, there's a massive fire called the Caldor fire, and it's only percentage of it is contained. The AQI, air quality index, under 50 is healthy, green. Right now it's, I think, 700.
Wow. So the next one I got here is, we covered the internet apocalypse. Russian space chief issues cryptic invitation to Elon Musk. Dmitry Rogozin, the head of Russia's space agency, just reached out to SpaceX's Elon Musk on Twitter with a cryptic invitation. Good afternoon, Mr. Elon Musk. He writes, on October 5, a new expedition will leave the International Space Station. We are planning to send a cinematographic group of the leading television channel as part of it. According to Rogozin, the goal is to tell the truth about manned flights, about the constant risk and tremendous emotional impact of all space flight organizers, presumably through the magic of television. He told Musk he'd be glad to meet him personally at the in Kazakhstan at the Cosmodrome. The personal invitation ended in a strangely haunting way. Come, we are waiting for you. Well, no, that's kind of how Russians talk. But Rogozin reached out on the same day. Russia state news agency TASS reported that the general director was also formally inviting NASA Administrator Bill Nelson for a chat. Administrator Nelson is looking forward to meeting with Director General Rogozin as soon as COVID-19 will allow, NASA press secretary says. The invitation was equally shrouded in cryptic messaging. Some matters should be discussed personally, Rogozin wrote on his Telegram channel, as quoted by TASS, revealing that Nelson and his wife were also invited to his home. It's unclear if Rogozin is simply asking for Musk to swing by for a television interview or if something greater is at play. It's an especially strange invitation at a very little love has been lost between Rogozin and Musk. Rogozin has repeatedly voiced his discontent with Musk and SpaceX. In a fiery op-ed published last June, for instance, a bitter Rogozin accused SpaceX of undercutting the competition by playing against the rules and mocking Russians' space efforts. But Rogozin may now be starting to change his tune. He congratulated Virgin Galactic on its successful launch to 50 miles in July, calling it a landmark achievement in space travel on Twitter. He even went as far as decrying Russia's billionaire oligarchs in a follow-up tweet, saying they'd rather spend money on yachts than developing spacecraft, and sentiment that garnered a hand-clapping emoji response from Musk. Musk has maintained a mocking and sometimes derisive tone when discussing Russia and its space efforts, as well as occasionally partaking in some lighthearted and long-running jokes. Russia's space agency has also turned a cold shoulder to NASA as of late, more broadly speaking, starting to distance itself from the international space community. Rogozin's repeated shifts in tone make his message even more difficult to interpret. Was something lost in translation? Why is Rogozin all of a sudden interested in Musk and Nelson's input? Occam's razor would suggest Russia's space agency simply wants to get a soundbite from Musk about how difficult it is to send humans to space, but whether Musk will end up accepting the offer is impossible to predict. The billionaire has been outrageously busy juggling his time between Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink. That leaves very little time for an interview with a man he's butted heads with on multiple occasions and his extremely remote region of Kazakhstan, no less. And they shame on the journalist for not mentioning the trampoline joke, which this gentleman who runs Russia's space agency, Rogozin, made the joke about America, that America, prior to SpaceX, had lost its ability to get to space, and they are dependent on Russia to get to space. And maybe they could, if they don't use Russia, maybe they could get there on a trampoline. And then once Musk got was able to dock with the International Space Station, the first thing he said was the trampoline is working. And as a big fuck you, dickhead, we can. Matter of fact, you are dependent on NASA's money, and now you're not going to get it. I am. So now SpaceX is getting NASA's money, and Russia's not, and now it's dying. And so this guy's business is headed for the garbage bin, and Elon knows it. So maybe he's looking to defect and join SpaceX so he could have a fucking job in 10 years. So funny that they didn't mention that in the article. Anywho, the next one is that China swoops on algorithms in latest tech clampdown. Boy, everyone's covering this one. China is seeking to tighten oversight of the algorithms technology companies use to drive their business, issuing far-reaching draft rules in Beijing's latest move to crack down on the internet sector. The Cyberspace Administration of China said in a statement here on Friday that companies must abide by business ethics and principles of fairness and should not set up algorithm models that entice users to spend large amounts of money or spend money in ways they might that may disrupt public order. Like what, for example? How are social media users spending monies in a way that would disrupt public order? Like buying tear gas or something? What are they possibly talking about? The guidelines include a proposal that users be given the option to easily turn off algorithm recommendations. Okay, so they would have to go to straight chronological, I guess, like with no algorithm, giving consumers a greater say over an area of the internet that has also been the target of authorities in the United States and Europe. Imagine watching TikTok with zero algorithm. That app would die in 48 hours. And as far as I'm concerned, this policy marks the moment that China tech regulation is not simply keeping pace with digital regulations in the European Union, but has gone beyond them. Yeah, that's an understatement. Head of tech policy research at Beijing-based consultancy Trivium China. The move will go directly impact some of China's biggest tech companies, with shares of e-commerce giant Alibaba Group falling as much as 5%. Algorithms are used in a whole suite of technologies, from facial recognition tools to social media platforms, and tech companies have come under fire globally for failing to protect users' privacy and for allowing the spread of disinformation. In China, state media have accused companies of using them to pressure people into purchases and promotions. The White House has called on tech companies to tweak their algorithms to root out false information and has signaled out Facebook, while the European Union has drafted rules that threaten fines on big tech companies if they do not do more to tackle illegal content. Under the draft guidelines, which are open for public consultation until September 26, Chinese authorities will be able to inspect algorithms and request rectifications should they find problems. And Reuters, why didn't you actually show the 5 bullet points of the actual planned regulations where they say no twerking and all that? It's quite comical what they're going to force these algorithms to do. So electric truck startup Rivian filed for IPO ahead of September production launch. This is breaking news, just sent in from Shawshank in the audience. Indeed, it just literally an hour ago. So Rivian is backed by Amazon. It's Amazon's EV, autonomous EV. It's Amazon's version of Tesla. It's Jeff Bezos' version of Tesla. And it includes the Amazon delivery vehicles. And so now they're filing for an IPO. Startup EV truck manufacturer Rivian has filed for an IPO offering in advance of its anticipated production launch next month. Rivian announced Friday it submitted a draft registration statement to the Securities Exchange Commission for the proposed public offering, with the size and price range yet to be determined. The IPO is expected to take place after a SEC review subject to market conditions, the company said. Founded in 2009, Rivian's building an electric truck and SUV, as well as 100,000 custom EV delivery vans for Amazon. An investor in the company, Amazon's the investor in the company. Rivian has raised about $10 billion from investors since 2019. A roster that also includes Ford and T. Rowe Price, valuing the company at $28 billion at the start of the year. So now Rivian's IPOing. 39 million Africans may fall into poverty this year, says Adesina. And from The Guardian, president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Adesina, has warned that another 39 million people in the continent could fall into poverty at the end of this year. Adesina stated that the ongoing virtual Africa-Singapore Business Forum, he said the 39 million people could pass on as an adder number to 30 million individuals rendered poor by the COVID-19 pandemic. According to him, the people impact is the worst negative consequence of the pandemic, with 30 million jobs lost and inflation spiraling out of control. The debt also began to accumulate. On the bright side, he said 85% of operators in the special economic zones of Africa believe that the foreign direct investment flow to the continent would rise significantly again, while 90% outside of Africa believe the same. Okay, and that brings us to the end of another Tech News Around the World. And today's Saturday already? Jesus Christ. So we're going to take the tomorrow off as we always do, but on Sundays we do have the MedTech room.
No, today is Friday.
Oh,
Friday night.
You're right.
Friday in
Yeah,
US.
it's Friday for
So
us.
tomorrow
Yeah,
there's
so
a
you're in
session.
the future.
Tomorrow there is a FinTech news
That's
in the
right.
afternoon. I mean,
in the morning.
In the morning, 12 hours time, and then after that there will be another Saturday
Right.
session.
So at this time, same time now that we met now, we'll have another Tech News Around the World. So that's good news. So we all have that to look forward to. Thank you.
Tyler,